Okay,
Okay.
maybe we need to start and see if we can still work him in as we can.
So Alex, are you online with us?
Yes. Maybe.
Can
Alex, are you able to speak to us?
Yep, we are going on YouTube now. If you guys are ready to go.
Can you give us 2 minutes just to organize really quick?
Yep,
So
sure thing.
when Chair Booth comes back on, I'm wondering if someone can give him a quick, well, I wonder how we can like find out where they're at, because they're both on Teams.
You know what? I got another way for you to get on.
Yeah, we're trying to get him in through the phone right now. Trying to get him in through other ways.
Oh, okay, through a phone. Yeah, can he come on with voice?
Yep, we are currently working through that right now.
Okay, do you want us to wait?
Let me try to
Till
get you in this way.
9:30?
How's it sound?
Whenever you guys are ready to go, you can start going, and we will try and patch him in as soon as we can.
Okay.
The only thing I think we might want to talk guidance document before we actually talk rule, so that we make sure they coordinate. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Just so
Okay.
that the one,
Okay.
coordinates with the other.
So
And we're
what
not
we can
having to
do-
do the rule, then go back and modify.
Yeah. So what we can do is, Elise, if you'll show the guidance document first, would you like for anyone to start speaking to it, or just show it and then have
It's just not popping into my
Yeah,
head.
Emily, I mean, I put it together for the most part, but whoever, however Emily wants to direct that.
Yeah.
So,
Vice Chair Booth, how would you like for us to start? Would you like for us to, when we do the instructional materials guidance, we can put it up and then you can just speak to the, that we're going to be going through that, which is incorporated, and then we will be going into the draft too. And then Elise will pop those up and maybe start talking through it, and then we can wait for Chair Booth for voting. I don't know. Michelle, are there strict rules with that? Should we just start going through with the voting or wait for Chair Booth on that end?
we just need a majority.
Yeah.
You just need a quorum to be able to vote. If he's working on something else and he's not able to listen to the discussion, it's difficult for him to be able to vote.
Yes. Okay, well, I will wait for direction from Vice Chair Green. And whenever you tell us to begin, we will begin. We are ready.
All right. I mean, we can start. So let me just make sure we just want to open the meeting and then direct that to the guidance document. Is this correct? Okay. Yeah.
Just make sure you speak to the fact we've had some technical difficulties and apologize to the public. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Whenever we're ready here.
Okay, Alex, if you want to, and Jerry, if you want to get us started, we'll go ahead and have Vice Chair Green start the meeting.
All right, we are good to go.
Okay. All right. Are we ready?
We are good to go.
Okay. All right. I'd like to welcome everybody here. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, and so we're just finishing ironing out some little hiccups that we've had, but thank you for everybody working on their end to make that happen. And also for all the working parts to have this meeting today for standards and assessment. We will first start with our sensitive materials guidance document and open the floor up for discussion for that. And then bring forward any motions or that we need to, or and then take votes for that when Chair Booth gets here with us officially. So let's go ahead and open the floor for discussion. And what is in front of us is the instructional materials guidance document.
Okay,
Are we looking at draft 2?
I don't think so. I don't think there's 2 drafts up. Would that be accurate? I would have to look back at the thing. I just think there was just one that was posted. So would you like me just to speak to kind of the thoughts process behind this? Would that be the best thing to do?
Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, so in looking at our model policy, and then this is just last week, I spent a lot of time looking at our model policy because there was discussion about updating the model policy to reflect current law. Spent a lot of time looking at a lot of other districts' model policies and realized there's just some interesting nuances depending on a large district versus a small district versus a lot of moving parts. So to try to create a model policy that people don't have to use is a lot of time spent. So the recommendation I would recommend is that the committee actually move forward this guidance document. And in this guidance document to actually, this just breaks down the parts of instructional materials, library materials, and then it goes through the key pieces of the law that have just passed and previous laws. So it kind of has all those pieces all together in one, and districts can go. I don't know if we want to set this up as kind of like that idea of a checklist. That's why I have these circles here, but however we want to reference that, that was the thought process behind this. So just that's kind of the behind the scenes. And then people can actually look and say, look, I need this according to the law, or a rule. Do we have that? And then however they want to structure the other components, they can, bring in their uniqueness depending on their size of district or charter. Then the structure of this is really, this starts with vetting instructional materials. So this is the law for both charters and districts relevant to just that, the key pieces from the law regarding instructional materials. So is it beneficial to read each piece, or have you guys already read it? Is there anything maybe in just this instructional materials piece that you would alter the language or change it? Most of it's taken directly from the law. I may have adjusted the language just a little bit so it read a little better than legalese. Should we just kind of leave it at that for a minute? And
Member Earl?
okay, yeah.
We talked about this a little bit, but one part of when I talked to some local LEAs, they had mentioned that, they have counsel, so they know how to interpret the law and they read through that, and their counsel does, but highlighting in some way the new pieces of so everyone has created their policies. Now, what do they need to, in regards to instructional materials, what changes in regards to the new law, and denoting that somehow in a different color or bolding it or something that, because I like the way that this is laid out with the different sections, but doing something to differentiate between, here are the things that you probably already have, you should have in your policies already based on the old law. Here are all the new pieces that you may need to make sure you add into your policy with the changes with the new law.
Okay. And I think that's great. I actually went through my document after I talked with you yesterday, Board Member Rill, and kind of highlighted those provisions. So as we get to each
I
one of
figured so.
those, instructional materials section, I don't believe has any new changes according to the law. The new law that came in. So this, what's here, I think has been here, and someone could correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't know.
Basically, the definition of instructional materials and guidance on that within the law, the code.
Yeah, except for this isn't where we find that definition from. That definition is found. I think this might have another reference. Am I right? Does anybody want to correct me on that? I think that part is actually down where we do the vetting, that's referencing a specific definition. So if you go down just a little bit more, is Andrea driving it? So under the general provisions for sensitive materials, that's where you're going to find that these things here would have to almost all be highlighted because they're relevant to the pieces of the new law. But the instructional materials up above is already, it's just a piece of what responsibilities that a local LEA or a charter would have, a district or a charter would have. And those are the two pieces of law that reference those. So I don't think there isn't anything I would highlight here. Is that what, if that's what you're asking, board member? Ray?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, I was just saying generally as we talked
Okay,
about
okay.
the whole document, but that makes sense. I mentioned this, but it's sort of like, what can we create that will be the most useful without being too, you know, like parenty over our LEAs, to give them guidance to help them create their policies based on the new law. So whatever that looks like. And I think I was thinking about it, and there actually probably is someone who is like a technical writer / designer that could create, you know, keep this format, but design it in a way that's super helpful. The other thing that I think would be, and maybe Elise or Michelle can give us some guidance on this, but adding something at the beginning that talks about how this is just a guidance document. This is not the rule. So just so that folks know that they're not, because we don't want to run into a situation where an LEA is quoting our guidance document and not really understanding that there is actual rule. And this is just to be helpful for them in creating their policy. Just a line or something at the top that's like, you can find the rule here. This is just a guidance document on the policies, on the law.
I think if you just cite the rule in the introductory paragraph that's already there, it kind of serves what you're wanting to have. Member Reel.
That was good. I can't stop coughing still.
Okay. And are you thinking that it may need to be reworked just a little bit more? Or do you feel like this language is adequate? I don't know if Elise or we feel like the language at the very beginning is okay.
I personally think it serves that purpose of saying this doesn't have everything and you need to rely on your own legal counsel to review it as well, but refers to the law and the rule. We could put the reference to both the law and the rule there.
Okay. Okay.
Other than those, then going through and highlighting each section, but I think it'd be good to go through each section to see if there's, I mean, Jenny, remember Earl, you did such a great job
Yeah.
of being so thorough on this. I just like the work
Well,
that
and
you
I
put
have-
into it. I just applaud you. But other than the highlighting the new stuff, basically, and so that we make sure that they know here are the changes in some way, I think everything else looks good as far as I understand the law and the old law.
Okay, and that's why I wanted to go down just through each piece, because there are a couple of provisions that I didn't do. When I went back and did a double check, there's a couple that need a little bit more clarity, but if we went down, so I guess, Vice Chair Green, I think we could probably look at just that first little section and see if there's anything there. If not, then we could just move to the next section.
Yes.
Is
Let's just go section by section
Okay.
and just, if we need to rework any of those specific bullet points, we
Okay,
take the time to do that. That'd be great.
I don't have any recommendations on this section unless anybody else does. If there's any staff that the wording is okay, or
I would suggest that we put an LEA governing board instead of a local school board at the
Okay.
beginning.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, because that would cover both provisions, right? So, thank you. Okay, if there's not, I guess we wouldn't vote till, well, I guess we could vote, right? We're just waiting
I'm
for,
I'm
Board member.
wondering,
Yeah.
do we like the bullet points? Does anybody feel like we need to number those or ABC or, you know? the alphabet, the I, you know, Roman numerals? Or does it's a minor detail, but I have been wondering about it.
I don't care. I don't know if that makes sense. Whatever's going to be easiest visually for people to use, and, you know, I don't know if we just leave that stylistic up to our, you know, who is it that does it? Barbara? Or if we, I mean, if someone has a strong preference, I'm good with whatever on that. Emily, do you have our board member Green, do you have a strong preference on that?
I guess I do a little,
Okay.
not passionate, but just for being able to reference easier. Like if they are in a meeting and they're developing their policies or updating it, it just seems like to map it out would be easier for people.
I think you're probably right. Like section 1 is instructional materials, right? And then under that, oh yeah, I think you're right.
So maybe if we can just make that minor change.
Yeah. And then maybe a Roman numeral for section 1 or instructional materials, something like that. So people are they can actually, yeah, yep. Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
Okay, I think that makes sense. It's not just a checklist. You can actually go and say, we need to do F on I-1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's good.
I'm here.
Yay.
Hi, Randy, or Chair Booth.
Welcome.
We're glad you made it. Sometimes that
Jerry
tech.
has reinvented Zoom. He had to start from the ground up.
Jerry has the skills to do that,
He's
yes.
amazing. And he had a helper too that helped him figure out why it was doing this. So we're here. I apologize for being late.
We understand. Thank you so much for sticking with it, and and everybody else that helped that. Sometimes tech can be frustrating. And
Well,
have a
Sure.
mind of its own.
So can go right ahead, and I'll just jump in when I figure out where you're at.
Chair Booth, I'm wondering if Vice Chair Green can give an overarching of where we're at and which document we're on to be able to help aid you in where we're at right now.
Yes, so we've been discussing the sensitive materials guidance document for about 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
We are going through each section and just doing an overview of that to make any changes or adjustments. We added a reference to the rule in the opening paragraph. And we just made the change so that instead of bullet points, we've put the letters next to them so the document becomes a little bit more user-friendly. And
Good.
we are
That
currently
sounds
on the instructional materials section. So that very first section. So it's open up if anybody has anything that we feel like we've left out or we want to adjust, then we're making those considerations right now.
Good. Thank you very much for the update.
Does anybody else see anything in instructional materials that they wanted to address? And if not, maybe we move forward to the library materials section. I'm good.
Yeah,
but
I did too.
Okay. Member Reel?
Yep, all good.
Okay. And Chair Booth, do you feel okay about what you
I'm
see?
just finishing reading here.
Okay. No
Yep,
worries.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, let's move to library materials section.
Can I ask a quick question? So sorry.
Yes.
This is very minor. Can I change the verbs to all be singular just so that they all match? So post, hold, adopt, make. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay. I'll go back and do that.
Just grammatical, whatever we got to do there would work. So, yeah,
Thank you.
in my view, I didn't.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
library materials, it's, and is responsible, the governing board is. So do we want to replace the bullets on this one as well, so that it's consistent?
Yeah, I think so.
So we'd be A and B and then 1, 2, 3. Or would we be small letter I, 1, 2, 3, or what's the next? Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is sort of what I was talking about like there must be someone that is a technical writer or designer that could lay this out in a way that will make sense, because Chair Booth, what I was saying at the beginning of the meeting is that, oh, I don't know, my camera's not on, is that it'd be good to point out the pieces that are new, the new law. So the changes in the policies these LEAs need to make, so that, because they should already have a policy for their old one. So figure out a way to lay out. This is like fully a design thing, not a content thing. I sometimes think it that way, but so making it bold or a different color or something that says like, this is the new pieces in the policy you need to add. But
And
I feel like
don't
there's
have-
someone that's out there that's a technical, like a designer that could do something really fancy with that.
And I don't think any of these are new, like even the online. Or
No,
the
yeah, I was
online-
just talking more
yeah.
broadly about.
Oh,
things.
yep, sorry.
Yeah, and that is something that we can do just in the final motion, just put and make technical edits as discussed within the meeting.
Sounds great. Very good. And Davina, you had a point?
Yeah, just a couple of like library language that might be helpful for LEAs. So C says library maintenance policy. We actually call it a collection development policy. And then underneath within the collection development policy is the selection criteria and deselection and reconsideration. So I'm just wondering about maybe C becomes A and it becomes shall establish a library development, or I'm sorry, a collection development policy that includes selection criteria. And then I think further down, we also say, let's see. I guess we don't say deselection. But just so that it's in order of like how a library and a school and an LEA would look at, yeah, exactly. And you include all the other parts of that. So like the maintenance process. So CI right now, if we moved that up and that becomes the collection development process may be used to just deselect and remove materials that are inconsistent with Utah code. And I don't know if it's important necessarily, but I mean, we deselect materials for a variety of reasons besides just 53G 10103.
Does D speak to that or not?
Let's see.
Because the intent was that's specific to what's in the law.
Yeah.
But then the other is may use criteria found harmful to minors like violent. They can use other things for deselection.
So
I guess it would.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I apologize. I was just going to say that deselection historically has meant like the book is no longer being checked out, or the book is falling apart, or there's a newer version of the book that appeals to students, you know, it connects more with students. So unrelated to necessarily
Content, you're saying?
there is some content just like, oh, this is not a book that kids are really interested in anymore, right? Like times change and they get interested in other things. So
So what would the words be, Davina? Let's get that in. I'd love to include that.
So establish a selection process that includes, so where we have C right now, I think that's still part of A. So it would be it'd be II. So if C moved up to II, and we change that to say, and maybe it's actually, well, let's put it there and then I can look at it. So it's actually the collection development process as opposed to maintenance, maybe used to deselect and remove materials that are inconsistent with Utah code. And I'm trying to think of some wording here, to help to ensure a library collection remains current, relevant, and in good condition. If we really want to like speak to best practice for librarianship. And that would cover it all as far as deselection.
Okay. And what about C down
Yeah,
below?
do we want to move C up there as well? It would seem like that would fit there.
Yeah, I think it fits under in that same section. And A actually is a collection development policy. Yeah, there we go. And then everyone knows what we're talking about. Like this is how they've been trained to use this language.
Okay, now B becomes,
So B is really part of selection. So using objective criteria, and I don't know how, like, how many levels we want to go down. It gets a little.
That was the problem, right? When I looked at a whole bunch of districts, so this was just broad language. One district had this, and I just felt like a broad language that just says, look, you know, there's different formats, there's different genres. I think when you start breaking them out, then you're trying to cater to everyone, and you're really not. Do you know, does that make sense? Not that, I mean, districts can do whatever they want. I don't know that we have to break all that out. A lot of them already have established in their policy what that looks like. This just gives that general feel, instead of getting into the weeds. So thoughts on that, Davina?
So I guess I'm wondering do we need to spell out in AI, do we need to spell out includes library materials, gifts, and donations? Did that come from somewhere else and that's why we included it?
I believe I can look, I think it's in the law. In other words, you have to have a mechanism for these other items as well. And I saw that in almost every policy.
Yeah.
So it's just not libraries, that they actually know that if you're gifted something or something's donated, that it needs to go through the same process. It doesn't just automatically make it into a collection.
So what if we change B to say something? So do we add B to I, but we change it to say something like this? So I would be establish a selection process that includes library materials, gifts, and donations, and supports Utah core standards and the interests of students, staffs, and families. And then that, maybe we don't need all of that stuff. That kind of summarizes that. But if you felt strongly about any of that, like for example, you could add the for example there in that I, if we wanted that.
Okay, let me read back through it now to see if it establishes a selection process. It doesn't make a very good transition. Let's see, and donations and supports. Hold on, maybe it does. Gifts and donations. I think would that be two separate things? Do you want to almost end it donations and then do a new, do you know what I mean? And then start there,
Yeah,
supports you
sure.
talk for. I like that better. I'm good with where we're at there.
Yeah. So then you don't need.
The
be-
verbs are kind of funky. To the first one, established, the next one, supports.
Mhm.
Then it repeats.
So you would take,
like
yeah,
normal
I think you would,
policy.
I think you would take establish out. It would just be includes a selection process. I don't know.
I
On the
think that
next,
includes a second time there, right? It includes a process that includes. Ah, there you go.
maybe the next one has to be support for. I don't know. It just
Yeah.
includes and then goes into supports, doesn't work real well.
Can I add something?
You
Just
bet,
that
Jill.
Davina mentioned adding staff in there on the supports the interests of Utah students, staff, students and families.
And I always like to put students first. I know that's like, but I just feel like that's why we're all here. So, and just reference staff is like, we do buy materials to support staff professional learning and development for, classroom, curricular needs. So that's where that comes from. And so that means B can come out because we included B and we kind of changed some things and made it II.
Would there be a period on II at the end, personal growth? Yeah.
Oh, and one more word on III, current, relevant, and in good condition, if that's okay with the board.
Sounds good. So I think as we lead into that III 3 there, it's we've got to look back at A, develop a library collection development policy that includes,
A process that is used to deselect and remove materials that are inconsistent. Yeah.
or just even use a process used to deselect.
Yeah, you can get rid of that is. It's the same thing, a process used.
Deselect and remove materials that are inconsistent with the code.
You might not even need the word used, a process to deselect and remove materials.
Yeah. Wow, we're getting better and better.
It can't be that are inconsistent with the code. It has to be consistent, that are consistent with Utah code, right?
Okay.
And I
we
guess
call-
it's because the way it was worded before, it just said, you can't be inconsistent. So now it's got to be that are consistent, right?
Right.
Okay.
Maybe instead of and to ensure, just ensuring that ensuring that the library collection remains current, relevant, and in good condition.
Okay, does that feel good, Davina?
Yeah, I think that flows really well. Thank you for
You're
humoring
welcome. It
me.
still has, yeah, it has the provisions that I was looking for in it too. So,
Could
We've
we
already got the
remove
shall up above
the
in
words that
two.
make it?
So we need to lose B's shall and just make it provide.
In small 3, it still doesn't read right when it says deselect and remove materials that are consistent with 53G10. It sounds like the materials are consistent with the sensitive materials. Could we just say deselect and remove materials consistent with, instead of that are consistent?
Yeah.
That's good. Michelle, thank you. Good catch. Okay, now under B, we've got some bullets.
I'm wondering, going back to that other one, that one just, and I apologize for going in, but that number 3, it does make it seem weird about removing. Is it in order to ensure, or is it in order with Utah code in order to ensure that a library, does that make sense? Because and ensure a library.
No, I think they're two different things.
Okay.
Making sure that they are consistent with code is one thing, and ensuring that they're current, relevant, and good condition is another thing.
What if we
They're two separate things.
swapped it? So it says a process to deselect and remove materials to ensure that a library collection remains current,
Yes.
relevant, and in good condition, and is consistent with Utah code.
Boy, that's nice.
The other way, it just seems like you're removing materials that are consistent with code, but there's not a, yeah.
That's very good. Should it be that a library to ensure that the library collection, should it be the instead of
Teamwork.
Love it. Okay. B, provide an online platform for library materials, which a parent is able to view.
and this is language right from the law. This is actually, I can tell you the code. Well, it's written right there. I tried to include the law at the end there. I don't know that we have to do that on each piece. I just wanted you to know where it came from as board members and as the public, but we probably just need to reference it once in this section. Does that make sense? I don't know that we need to reference it at the line end of every line, but I just wanted people to know where it was located.
So do we want to do that up on the top, the very first line of B, provide an online platform for library materials as per 53G-4-402 or something, or
Yeah,
as,
something like that. Yeah, however it needs to be referenced there. That can just be probably a technical change or whatever, and then taking off each of those others. This is not, none of this is new. So just to Sarah's request or board member or Real's request earlier, this is last year's. So, but it's relevant to what we're talking about. It's that preemptive protection thing before we get to any of the content that would be concerning. We're going to preempt it by going through these processes, which will help at the beginning. Protective, right?
So, I there under BI starts out with through which a parent. Now, I is, doesn't flow quite. So provide an online platform for library materials as per 53G-4-402.
It may need to say including a history of borrowed materials.
You took the words right out of my mouth. There you
Yeah.
go. Perfect.
It might need to say that includes to just flow with the heading sentence. Provide an online platform from library materials that includes a history.
What are you, a technical writer? Good job.
And then probably the I, something like, and shall be completed by something like that, right? Because that's the timeframes in the law.
Yep. It's a thing of beauty. There you go. All right. Emily, did you have a comment?
I'm like, I don't know if you heard my well done. I was actually just wondering on 3 there, could someone just briefly explain the numbers for the 1,000, more than 1,000 enrolled students or less than 1,000 enrolled students? Could someone just
That's just what it says in the law.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's just for
Yeah.
smaller districts to making sure they have the funding and resources to actually meet the law. That was more or less why it was that way, from my understanding.
okay, so it's like a threshold for
Yeah,
numbers and checking in with their ability to create something like this
yep.
or implement. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Booth.
Yeah.
All right. I'm good with this section.
Good. Let's move on.
Okay, and to
So,
speak to Board Member Rill's point, almost every piece in this next section is new in the law. So do we want to just ask that it be in a different color so that it can be identified at least at this point? Because that was the big thing, is some districts wanted somehow to be able to identify current changes in the law. I don't know how we want to do that, if we want to put it in another color just so we can identify it now, and then I don't know if it's bolded or italicized, or I don't know what.
Yeah, leave it up to the designer to figure out a way to make it look different or laid out in a way that's readable for that purpose.
I mean, for the first iteration that we provide you we could, have a cover memo and say, we've highlighted all of the new things,
Yep.
just like a yellow highlighter or something, here's all the new places, and the real document doesn't really have something like that in it, but for your interest and information, here's
I think
what's,
that's a great idea. The highlight part, instead of changing the color, just highlight, these are new provisions, right? I think it's brilliant. So.
it's far from brilliant at this hour of the morning, but functional maybe.
Okay, it's functional. I would have taken the other compliment, but.
So how about the general provisions for sensitive materials? How does that match with our previous 2 headings? The others were library something, and so is this number 3 instructional materials? So do we just need sensitive materials so that it matches the format of the previous 2? Library materials you had, and
Well, I broke, perhaps. I guess I put it in as general provisions. In other words, overarching things to be aware of, and then broke it down into each component, but it could just be sensitive materials if that works best.
Yeah, I was just looking up at the other two and they were just library materials
Ah,
and
got
previous.
you.
one.
Okay.
Mhm. Instructional
Yeah,
materials,
I like
library
that.
materials,
Okay,
sensitive materials.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do we want to just read through each one, or what do you want to?
I think that sounds great.
Okay, would you like, I'll read
Please
it,
do.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Materials determine objective sensitive materials or subjective sensitive materials are removed from all school settings at an LEA, and instructional materials are not exclusively library materials. Those were articulated in the law specifically, so I don't know if that needs, is that worded? Do you like
Start
that
with
word?
the word instructional materials. Add the word instructional at the beginning of that first bullet.
Okay,
I
Okay.
think it
Does-
doesn't say in a school setting. So instructional materials are all materials in a school setting. Oh, you removed it. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
and I think the point, it's worth pointing out, though, I don't know if we need another heading. It may seem duplicative, but they put it in the law specifically spelled out because it was, people were missing that even though it says it, it was said it before. Does that make sense? So I don't know if we just, do you want another heading for, I mean, another bullet point?
I think it's important it's in there. I agree
Yeah.
with you, Member Earl. I do think that that's an important part of the law, the change in the law.
Should we just do it, do we just do two pieces instead of one there, instead of the and, we just have it as another bullet point?
I like that because I was wanting to even take out and it just read funny.
Yeah, yeah. And then we can take off the reference there at the end. I just wanted people to know where it came from. So, you know, we can obviously put it up above, but just wanted to make sure they understood it came out of the actual law. So that's, those two would probably need to be highlighted or color coded or whatever. And I don't know if you want to do that as we're going or just at the end. I know there's a note there. So.
Okay, so we're gonna make these what? A, B, and one little 1, 2, 3. I mean,
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
Or- okay. So objective sensitive materials, should that be in quotation marks or just objective in quotation marks, sensitive materials, or subjective in quotation marks? Or should the whole thing, objective sensitive materials in quotation or subjective sensitive materials? So it's setting them apart a little bit more.
In the documents from the committee, like from Mike Curtis, he
Yeah.
has them all three words like bolded or together. So maybe being consistent with that. So objective sensitive materials, either bolded or quotations, either one. But I've been copying his like formatting when I've been sharing information. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's good.
I think that's a good point, Randy. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're using that specific terminology. It's not just materials or sensitive material, right? It's the combination that means something specific. So,
So what does settings mean in the law? Are removed from all school settings, the cafeteria, the classroom, the
yeah,
auditorium, the library, the everywhere,
classroom, yep,
even the teacher's personal bookshelf or
not in the school.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. And I can read the definition if you'd like.
yeah.
If I
Yeah,
can-
go ahead.
Yeah.
School settings is a little bit confusing to me.
School setting means for a public school, in a classroom, in a school library, or on school property.
So do we want to refer to that definition or? for those of us who aren't aware that there is that additional clarification.
Well, and it even goes further than that. Sorry, I didn't read the next part. It includes the following activities that an organization or individual or organization outside of a public school conducts. If a public school or an LEA sponsors or requires the activity, assembly, a lecture, a live presentation, or an event.
Wow, I think that's good stuff.
So we could have I mean, we're doing that in the rule, but we could,
You could
it's up
also
to you
say
guys.
from all school settings as defined in 5310-103.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like that. Because if there's any
53G,
question,
yeah.
I mean, we're just taking the question out of it and it's so straightforward and clear that we could potentially really do what we wanted to do, and that would be protect children.
yeah.
The time that you have spent in making this not so discombobulated and going so many different directions is greatly appreciated, Jenny, and
You're
any
welcome.
others that have worked on it. This is,
Yeah, and I touched base with Emily and Sarah on it too a little bit, so.
I think in the end, it will be so helpful.
Okay,
And
so
all
the
the
next
people
one's
that are
in.
not happy with what we've done over the last long period of time, they feel that we've been sitting on the fence. This will provide them with something very helpful.
I hope so. Okay, so shall prioritize protecting children from the harmful effects of illicit pornography over other considerations in evaluating instructional materials. That, once again, is from the law, so that would be highlighted. I don't know if anybody has anything there. Okay, I'll keep going unless you guys tell me to stop. And then on the next one would need to, objective sensitive materials probably needs to be bolded. And that's also from the law as well. Clay, and then the next part, I worded this different than the law, but I really didn't. I simplified it. Includes employees, students, parents, and governing board members of the relevant LEA. That's the part I added and combined them together. As individuals who may initiate a sensitive material review. And that is in the law. It spells out who can do the review.
Do we want to start that out with individuals who may initiate a sensitive materials review include employees?
Sure. Whatever makes it easiest to understand.
There was
Yeah,
something on number 2, the sensitive materials. Should that be like number 1? Or should that be a subset of instructional materials? It seems like it's just a clarification that I'm not sure it comes off of sensitive materials, which is the number 3 heading up there.
I see what you're saying, because you're saying number 2 may not.
Should number 2 be a subset of number 1? Because that's dealing with instructional materials. And then as we go on 4, 5, 6, 7, it's not as much instructional materials. So under the instructional, or should that can be combined in some way? Instructional materials determine.
I think these were just intended to be the key components that they added to the law. So if you wanted to, I guess if you wanted to structure them somehow, that could happen. Kind of independent thought.
I guess number 4 is also instructional material, but number 3 refers to maybe more than just instructional material, or, I mean, it could be just a book that's on the library shelf or whatever. So I was just wanting to, since you started out with instructional materials that are either objective or subjective or removed, and these instructional materials may not be exclusively library materials, they could be anywhere. And if it constitutes objective sensitive material, no further review is necessary. So then those are instructional. Then we're ready to move on to the number 3, which generally that would refer to not just instructional, but just regular, whatever, magazines on the library shelf or videos or, whatever kinds of things that may not be instructional.
You could change the heading to sensitive instructional materials, and then it includes both of them, and you don't have that dilemma with it doesn't fit under sensitive materials. So then your heading covers both instructional materials and sensitive materials. That's the title of the law anyway, is sensitive instructional materials.
Oh, okay. Okay. So is there some place in the law that just deals with sensitive materials that may not be used in the instruction, that somehow finds their way into some setting?
No, they shouldn't be in the school setting at all if they're sensitive.
Yeah, I agree. So, but they may not be instructional. They may have found their way into some, I
Well,
don't
and
The
that's
instructional
the,
materials very broad. It includes reading materials,
Yeah.
handouts, videos, digital materials, websites, online applications, and live presentations. It goes on and makes it very broad to include everything that could be in there.
and I think, Randy, the point in putting it, the top piece in and not just starting here, putting that 1 and 2 in, is to say, look, you bear the responsibility here. Here's your protections. Now, if we have a, something that does make it through, here's how we work with it, right?
Mhm. I would just think, I'll just say it, and if nobody else is with me, I'm fine with that. I'm just wondering, should number 3 be number 1? So that we've said this is the priority in all of this is protecting children, no matter how else you're evaluating, you're saying, but this is a critical part of the body of literature of the 21st century, whatever somebody might say. The priority
You're
is we're-
talking the order of it. Is
The
your
order of it,
concern.
exactly.
Okay.
So then the 1, 2, and 4 that are all referring to instructional materials are all also, it just seems like we've kind of inserted that priority sentence. So if it's up there at the top, we've stated what's important, what's critical to the law and to good, well-meaning parents and leaders who want to just, this is why we're doing all this, is to protect kids, rather than just inserting it in the middle someplace. And then go ahead with 2, 3, 4, all of them instructional material.
I would support that.
Yeah, I would too.
I do.
Mhm.
Okay.
With that being said, I wonder if the 9 should come up under 4, maybe, let's see, or, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to, you're trying to organize according to
Things you're
thought
talking about.
process, right?
Yeah. So I think that's great.
So it would be, I think, under 4 maybe, and then get into the other components of things. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Mhm.
Now on that one, I left D open because I don't remember if we had any other items. I don't remember if we had health education items that needed to be referenced there.
I've also been trying to think of what the other ones are because I feel like there might be one missing. I know concurrent medical courses, family and
Well,
consumer
these-
science.
These are the ones in the law. Once again, this needs to be highlighted. All of these provisions are in the law, but D, I can't remember if we had it some with it. I'll look it up. R277. I just didn't look it up the other day. I should have. Anyways, we can move on. I'll look for that. I don't know if others have that too, but
I also think we could simplify it and just say concurrent enrollment, which requires parental consent. Without over explaining it. Because we already say it doesn't include, so if we wanted just to cut some of this down.
yeah, and that's the language from the law. Let me see if that, let's see the current course.
Concurrent
It's
enrollment. which
missing
provide-
they select under 53G 10402, which is the health curriculum.
Health, that's it. I knew there was another one.
It's missing. It says that an LEA selects under 53G 10-402. That's the way the health curriculum reads.
Do we reference that in our rule? Or is it just in 402 where they reference it?
I don't know the answer to that one. I'm sorry.
You're okay. I'm just looking at it. I just had wondered if we actually.
Let me check on that.
Yeah, I'm looking too. And that's fine. We're fine there. Because not all, yeah. I don't think we want to open it that broad. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, are we talking about all health curriculum can be sensitive materials just because it's health curriculum? Or are we talking
It
about?
needs to be selected under 53G 10-402. It has to
Yeah,
be
it's
selected
got
in that whole big process of with the open meeting and everything. Has to go
Okay.
through a very specific process in that code section.
Yeah, I just wouldn't leave it open to. Yep, that looks better.
Member Earl, when you say leave it open, do you mean by not including the code there or
No, we
starting
need
with?
to include the code because otherwise it leaves it too open. It's just like you can do sensitive materials as long as it's in your health curriculum. But that's not the case. It has to go through the process that Michelle was just talking about
Okay,
and vetted thoroughly.
okay, so the 402, I have that one open right now. That one's pretty detailed. So
Yeah.
great reference.
Do we have that anywhere? I'm not actually, am I missing it? I'm not seeing it in code there that references it.
I know I looked at it during the legislative session.
Yeah.
In the bill, it's line 71 of the bill.
Okay, that's, all right, thank you. I knew there was one more, that's why I was 71.
It's just not a new one. That one's not a new one.
Ah, that's probably why I didn't, okay. So that, well,
So
that one doesn't
one
need to be
could-
highlighted then.
that specific line is not highlighted.
Yeah. Okay, that's where I missed it.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we don't overly create guidelines for these LEAs so that they still, I just, like, I don't know if we need to over-explain the concurrent enrollment, for example. I just want to make sure that, one, it's something that they actually read and use. And two, that we, like, again, they have counsel to go through the law and see these different pieces. But I'm trying to simplify it where we can.
You know, the concurrent enrollment is such an interesting kind of realm of its own.
Yeah.
I know that I've had my kids that have done that, and we did have the form, and I'm also aware of courses that absolutely are offering sensitive things that would fall under sensitive materials that, 15, 16, 17-year-olds are doing.
Yeah.
So
It's just sort of like all of these
I-
LEAs have policies on it, right? They work with the concurrent enrollment. I don't think we need to overly explain it to them. And so I just saying like concurrent enrollment, which requires parental consent and include the code there is plenty, but it's also fine if we want to leave it as is.
I actually on this one want to leave it as is because I want to draw attention, let people know that it actually, some of these contain sensitive materials. There's 2 provisions. You have to provide a notice and a notice of the materials, and then you have to have a consent. So if we simplify it too much, I just worry that we're going to be missing a piece there. So.
Well, even
That's fine.
in like a language, an English class, there was a subject here, even at SUU that was pretty explicit, and I'm not sure that parents, they sign the form and they let the child go, and the child goes to class, and then, they are writing about pretty sensitive things. So I guess I do like that, and maybe, but I understand, remember, Real, what you're saying.
Is
by
there
weighing it
any
down.
way to
This
include
one's
all
such
of
a
this?
unique space, though.
I don't want to be overly guiding LEAs. I want to make sure they understand the law, make sure they know the new pieces, but I don't want to be like, overly guiding them so that they can create their policies. And yeah, they understand all of these pieces, and they have folks that help them interpret the laws, but I'm just trying to simplify it, but I also don't care either way.
So my concern with it is that it's long enough that I'm not sure I'm going to read it. Is there just 3 or 4 words we could cut out just to make it just a little bit more congruent with how much we're saying about all the other things that are in this sensitive materials section? I mean, I'd be happy to lose 3 words, just so it was like 3 lines instead of 4, or
We could say concurrent enrollment, sensitive materials, beware parents. I don't know. What do you think?
Perfect.
Well, yeah, and
For an enrollment course for which a parent receives notice and provides consent.
Okay, so here's a little bit of nuance that I do believe exists between concurrent enrollment courses and the K-12 education realm where they cross. Colleges don't have to filter content. We are creating an environment where even kids can earn college credit now before, 9th grade. And kids are getting associate's degrees when they graduate. The majority of their courses are transitioning into the college realm. So you have 2 academic realms battling for what you can and can't do. And it's a problem if we believe that we're trying to protect our children from, because of age appropriate material and content. So we have to be very clear in the expectation, and that standard has to be met by higher ed. And if they can't, then I think we have to reassess the partnership that we have with these universities. If we're going to make it so, high school is protected, but we on the other hand, we're funneling children more and more towards, these colleges so that they can earn college credit, and we're stripping away, we're speaking 2 things at the same time.
Well, I think the one part that's the most important, though, is that we're requiring parental consent. So it's the parent's choice if they are okay with their students seeing those sensitive materials and in order to get that college credit. So I'm comfortable with it because it leaves it up to the parents to decide. And so as long as they're aware and they come home with their paper and they make sure they sign it and give their consent in the 2 ways, it's that parent's choice if they are okay with their children doing so and getting getting college credit, which by the way is like a mega discount for them to do that.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know people can use their brain and they can get the signatures that they need. If it is not disclosed, and if that quality check does not exist in higher education because they don't perceive their materials as being sensitive, that will be left off of that paper that is signed. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, can we build in a checkpoint that requires that communication to occur between the college and the high school, and the parent understands this is their child entering in that realm is not protected under this law anymore. They've signed away that protection to their minor. And have we made it clear enough in this guidance policy that that LEA has to disclose that understanding? That checkpoint has to be built in, because we're parents. Like we sign 1 billion papers in August, and things slip through the cracks. And I think that parents we've existed in a realm where the sexualization hasn't been at the forefront like it is now. And so we're generations like, oh, we live in a different world. We got to be real careful about what is being presented, and as we should with minors. And our higher ed takes the liberty to present those topics. And so again, we're at the battle of wits here now between higher ed and high school children, regardless of a paper that is signed. Have we communicated to parents that when their minor enters in higher ed settings, they will be exposed to sensitive materials that we could prosecute through the law, and and they're going to have to deal with that situation. And so back to 5A, I'm glad we have numbers and letters to guide us back. Do we feel that what's written here, concurrent enrollment course for which a parent receives notice and provides consent? I think we're still leaving off the controversy here. And maybe controversy is not the right word. We've kind of stripped out the
point of it being in the law, right? The point of it being in the law is that it contains sensitive material. So I think if we're going to simplify the end, it's got to say concurrent enrollment course concurrent enrollment course that contains sensitive materials for which a parent receives notice and provides consent. If we're going to,
that works for me.
Yeah, that
works for me.
Good thought.
So it's after, yeah. Did you get that? For which, let's see. So a concurrent enrollment course that contains sensitive materials.
And I hear what you're saying, Member Green. I guess there's no way for us to be able to control some of those pieces, unfortunately. But what is in the law is good, I think, in making sure that there's checkpoints in order to allow students to take those concurrent enrollment courses. But a lot of it is sort of out of our hands, unfortunately, I think.
I think it has been out of our hands because it's like a new realm that's been created or developed. And I think any new realm has a chaotic moment where you're like, oh, okay, this is what we're dealing with. And hey, maybe this might be taking it too far. And is this really the direction we want to go? And I kind of feel like we're there. I do feel like, the way that we are providing students a way to get this credit is very helpful. It saves a lot of money. It it launches them into their career sooner. So, you know, I see all the positives, but it's also been like, we are still dealing with minors that deserve the right to be protected and be given a high quality academic setting where they're just not vulnerable to the whims of change, you know, unregulated. So it's just addressing those. Yeah. I don't know, the philosophy, I guess, of the matter. So
Chair Booth, I don't know if you know, but Deputy Superintendent Patty Norman had her hand up. I don't know if she had something to add or something.
Good. I now see that hand.
Thank you. I was going to ask for a legal interpretation on something, but then I didn't know if it was actually relevant. And so, Vice Chair Green, you bring up an interesting quandary, which is the fact that does parent permission, and I guess this is a question for AAG Buse, does parent permission I don't know, like proceed, it's the wrong word, the ability for something that's not legal according to an age become legal. I don't know if that's kind of what you're asking, like if something couldn't be done because of the age of a student, but now it can be done in college if a parent gives permission, where does the law lie on that?
yep, exactly.
So to me, in a different realm, I'd be talking about status offenses. Because of the age of a child, this thing is wrong. And so, or that they have done, but now something that's being done to them because of their age is wrong. I don't know where that lies. And so it's just an interesting point as you're speaking through it. So I didn't know if AAG Buse had any background on that or not.
I don't. It's just the statute says that if the parent gives consent by enrolling their child, then it's okay.
And I think I guess this is my concern then, is that it's like, okay, then parents really need to understand the setting that they are sending their children to, whether the controversy and this conflict exists or not. They have to understand that. And then we don't have any control over higher ed, but do we? We should, like to the extent that if they are now tailoring their business, their offerings to minors that have protections by law, in theory, that, you know, and I guess this is maybe something that we can look into more, what that looks like for higher ed, because I do see this is interesting, and a new frontier here. It's kind of like, can a parent, you know, and I'm going to take this way off into left field here, but it's like, can parents sign a paper and have them, you know, sell their children, you know, for the sex trade or whatever, because they signed that paper? I know that took it way out there. I don't like that, but it just begs the argument, like, where do we start making it that a signature can allow explicit circumstances to be legally presented and regulated and provided to minors? But I like what we've done, bringing it back to 5A. I like adding what we've added, and we can probably move on.
All right, let's continue.
Chair Booth, one other thing. Number 5, it needs something to it because it reads now sensitive materials do not include. If I skip A, sensitive materials do not include for medical courses, for family and consumer science courses. If we go to the statute, it says sensitive material does not include an instructional material and then for medical courses. And so I don't know, it needs something because it I just to make it complete. Sorry.
Good. Thank you. Good point. Any other Probably we want to get rid of the space between 3 and 4 and between D and 6. Okay. Anything else on 6, 7, 8, 9?
I'm reading through that.
Organizations without an apostrophe on 9.
Are we okay with the parentheses on 7 then? Is that the best way to reference that?
Jenny, you're muted. If you wanted to talk.
Sorry, I'm trying to grab I just realized my computer is gonna die. I had to do the quick run to grab the cord. So what was the question?
Let's see. Number,
No limitation on submissions unless an individual makes 3 unsuccessful challenges. You're
include,
asking if it needs the parentheses?
is that your question, Emily?
Yes.
I
know it's like a grammatical.
Right, it doesn't matter to me
Point,
how it's
but-
worded. That's just how it is in the. I don't know that it's exactly like that in the law, but I think I tried to condense it down. No limitation on submissions unless an individual makes 3 unsuccessful challenges inclusive of a direct review or appeal during a school year. Yeah, I think it's fine without those.
Is it a comma then?
Great. Any other points anyone want to bring up on sensitive materials?
I want to add one when we get to that point.
Okay. Add like a number 10.
Yeah, a number 10.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, it would be exposing students to sensitive materials is a conduct prohibited by educators in Rule R2771, R217. Maybe there's a better way to word that. I don't know if it's just, but I that is in our rule. Let's see, prohibited. Let's say exposing students to sensitive materials is a conduct prohibited by educators in Board Rule R277217, and people can decide.
Prohibited for educators or conduct prohibited? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We just need to reference the rule because it's in there, so they're broadly aware that it's under their code of conduct.
You could just say exposing students to sensitive material is prohibited and then mention the rule. I don't know if that. I also have a question on number 9.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if we should put contracted professional or contracted organizations. It just seems so broad because if it's contracted, it's in a different realm, right?
So is a contract supersede Utah law though? It wouldn't matter.
Well, but
would it?
professional organizations could be like, so I'm just saying like within the law, when we're picking sensitive materials, it's only the contracted organizations that would apply.
I'm not sure you want to limit it to that. I think it's like if a library organization, you didn't have a contract with them, the professional librarians organization recommended a certain book be in your library. If under Utah law, it was found to be a sensitive material, it still couldn't be put in the library just because the Librarians Association said that it was something that was a book that was recommended, I think is what is meant by number 9.
But it's only if they put it in, right?
But I don't think you
I-
contract with those organizations is what I'm saying. We don't have contracts with those organizations.
Right. I'm trying to remember what the law says about the professional organizations piece.
The law does not.
Mention it?
Nope.
Okay, so do we
So
feel like it needs
this
to
is an
be in here?
addition. We'll have to decide if it goes in here or not.
Okay,
But we're seeing a lot of these professional organizations referenced in place of law. That's why that's in there. When I look through a variety of different recommendations, that was one that often they would cite the recommendations of like the ALA and other organizations that were that contradicted elements of Utah law, or their recommendations did. So
Was this in Utah policy? Like, are you seeing this in Utah policies or is this?
Yeah.
was this-
Yep.
it might be a little too narrow for me, I guess, this part. Since it's outside of the law.
When is
Also,
it?
someone's
So
street clean.
I guess I asked the question, when do those organizations, their recommendations trump Utah law? That's all it's stating, is you still have to adhere to Utah law.
Right. I guess that's just sort of assumed. I don't think it's important to put it in the guidelines if it isn't in the law. For me, it's just a little narrowing, and I think could maybe be a little bit confusing since there's so much that come with those professional organizations or professional standards. I don't know. It's just maybe a little too narrow for me on this part.
I don't think it's saying you can't consider it. It's just saying it doesn't supersede the law. Right?
Right.
It's just saying you
But
can't.
that should be given, right? So
Well, you would think that, but I don't think that's.
I
the
guess putting it in
Matter
there
of fact, I know it's
makes
not
it
the case.
feel. Yeah, well, I know. I understand that. And that's like why I want to make sure that we're not over guiding LEAs in this.
You know, I could see a friendly reminder that Utah law supersedes everything. So as you're considering sensitive materials coming from whatever sources, the law is the law. If we wanted to say that, singling out professional organizations or whatever seems, yep, professional organizations and our teachers and our parents and everybody,
I
student.
think you could say then, how about Utah law supersedes recommendations coming from, I don't know, however you want to title that.
Utah law reigns supreme.
Yeah, it just seems so obvious to me. I don't want to be overly guiding because I want to make sure that we give trust in our LEAs to create the policies within the law.
This is one area I've seen the violation over and over though. And hopefully the law clears it up this year, but this is one where often these recommendations or outside entities are providing feedback on things and they conflict with various components of Utah law.
I can
Right, but it doesn't even matter if a parent says, hey, you should have your kids or, English students read this book. Like it all has to be within the law. It doesn't matter who recommends it. Just feels like we're calling out professional organizations in a way that I don't think is necessary when they're creating their guidelines.
I think, and I've spent some time thinking about this one too. I think what's happening, it seems, is that these teachers and librarians go to these conventions or these meetings, and then they're being told and trained on how to do their job, bring in materials, bring in books. And I think it's safe to say that there's parts of every industry that exists where they have a product to offer. And I think sensitive materials
is a realm of the part of our industry that exists, which has found a way into our public education. And what we're realizing is that it's kind of got away from us. And so now these people in these positions are put in the middle because they're being guided by the organizations that help fill the libraries. And then they bring back a product that is now in violation of Utah law. And so what we have to do here is clarify what they can and can't do. So I would rather see it as helping them be able to make those tough decisions around a specific part of the industry that is tailoring their product with a very specific intent and purpose. And we've acknowledged in this law that there are lines that are crossed where it takes it too far, and they can be prosecuted. So for me, I don't necessarily see that it would be micromanaging. I actually rather see that they understand that there are lines that are crossed with in this realm. And so we clarify that for them so that they know they have an expectation, and they know how to sort that out when the organizations are saying, you should do this, you should do this, you should bring in this, you should bring in this. And it's like, well, if the product could work, I could, but it doesn't, so I can't.
So let me give you a specific example. I'm not going to tell you the district, large district in the state of Utah. I'm reading right now. Library materials selection, reconsideration, and deselection guidelines. Library, school library collections. We affirm the American Library Association's Bill of Rights and interpretation of school libraries. And then when you go to their Bill of Rights, there's components within there that allow for access to all, not depending on any age, right? All materials should be accessible. So, and I'm not going to go to other things with the Bill of Rights, some other issues with that, but this is the point, is letting districts know that this Utah law supersedes these other organizations that are out there with a different vested interest.
So maybe we could say Utah public education, Utah law supersedes any other recommendations. Just as a little reminder.
I would just rather, any recommendations and take off professional organizations. I want to stay within what is in the law and not try to bring up things that we've seen issues with or whatever. Let's leave that to the legislation if they want to pass future ones. I just don't want to get
I don't want to be back here in a year though. That's where
I know, but I don't want to get overly guiding, because it causes a little bit of confusion, and it's harder to interpret when they're looking at the law and they're looking at our guidelines. I want to make sure that those match in that way.
So I would add on this one, including professional organizations. I just think that's where we're seeing the overstretch. Otherwise, it wouldn't, you're right, it wouldn't be necessary, but that is where the realm we're in, it's there. Well, maybe we need to just make a motion, take a vote. I don't know. So
I think that
Navina, you have a comment. Did you?
Yeah. This is where the controversy is. This is where the disconnect is. We are at the mercy of industry. The school system is one of the biggest industries in America, in the US. We are at the mercy of industry, where our products come from. The materials that we present to our children come from the industries that exist and the professional organizations. If professional organizations are creating Bill of Rights, that still doesn't trump the law of the land. As much as they want it to, they can have the Bill of Rights. That's great, but there's a higher level Bill of Rights that oversees them. And Utah law applies to that, so they can make it fluffy. And if teachers and these organizations, they don't understand that, confusion is there. And then again, we're back in the place where we've pitted our librarians against this issue. And I'm not sure we want to do that. I don't want to do that. That's what has been happening. So, and yeah, we can get some feedback here. Sorry, Chair Booth, you were calling on someone to speak.
That's great. Thank you for your comment. Davina.
I don't know if it would be okay if I provide just a little bit of context about the training that librarians do get, and I've been a part of these trainings, since I was a librarian. Age appropriateness and developmentally appropriate is always a part of those trainings. And while we do have the American Library, we as in our country has the American Library Association, there also is the American Association of School Libraries. And they do call out explicitly that we select materials for schools. We know that school materials is different than public library materials. And so I would expect that in a policy that may reference the Library Bill of Rights, because there is a intellectual freedom First Amendment, passion, I would say, that a lot of librarians have, but as part of a policy, I don't know that I've seen a policy that doesn't include age appropriateness in a policy. And so hopefully that just provides a little bit of context that is really important to selecting of materials in a K-12 environment. And maybe that is a piece that we add here, is just that it's age appropriate along with compliance with law. Just a couple 2 cents.
So I'm feeling that at the district level, at the local district level, there is a desire, I believe, to be compliant with the law. They know that non-compliance is not a real option. I mean, it's going to eventually come around. Whether they agree with the law, whether the law agrees with the High School Libraries Association or the American Library Association, whatever, the law is the law. And until it changes, we need a friendly little reminder that the law does trump anything else. I'm not trying to be unreasonable, but we're living in a fantasy world if they're thinking that, but this is what such and such or so-and-so says, because they've got to be compliant or they're going to have lawsuits. I had a lady come up to me on Saturday who said, this book is still in this library. We've gone through the process. It is clearly against the law. So what is my option? Do I go to the police and ask the police to go and arrest the principal, go and arrest the librarian, go and arrest the whatever? I said, the law is the law. If you are certain that this particular book, I would definitely go and talk with the principal and say, this is against the law. What as a law-abiding citizen should I be doing? How would you respond to a parent like that who came up to you in a candidate meet and greet with 10 other parents standing around in the group listening in to hear what wisdom is coming from? Well, all I could say was the law is the law. And so if you're sure and certain that this is, you need to go talk to that principal or whoever it is that is upholding that particular book that you are sure is against the law. I don't know. Not trying to be obstinate. I just didn't know how to handle that Saturday. I still don't, without except to say that the law is the law. For me, I'm going to be compliant.
And I think this is what's been so difficult about this subject for quite a while now. And
And if I may just highlight that I do feel that a part of that disconnect is whose voice or authority kind of reigns supreme. Not in a tyrannical whatever way, but in a way that we can acknowledge that we can have quality checks so that we can keep, doing what we're supposed to be doing, keeping kids safe and educating them. So I don't know. I'm still of the opinion that on 9 in public education, Utah law supersedes any recommendations. I feel that it is an incomplete statement. I'm okay to call maybe for a vote to keep in by professional organizations. And if I may just hammer down one more, just my thought as I think out loud, and I'd like whatever feedback is welcome by professional organizations. Our libraries there's relationships that exist with the libraries. They have a place where they acquire their books. They have funding that allows them to acquire those books. If those professional organizations provide those services through documents, trainings, guidance, and then the product itself, are distributing and products that violate a law that we have in place, the organization, the vendor, the provider is the problem. If there are other ways and other avenues where recommendations fall outside of, I'd like to know right now. But my understanding as a transactional relationship in an industry, that is what we're dealing with. That's where the problem comes from. Now, am I correct? Or is it broader than that? And I'm open to any.
We have just so many processes in place to approve any materials that, I mean, if something is recommended, it still has to go through the process of being approved. So in any case, with all of our instructional and art materials for any standards or curriculum, all of those have to go through so many processes in order to be approved. And I'm sure that things slip through the cracks, but I just for like the 90s, I just don't want to overly guide folks, and so it just feels really vague at this point to include it and put something in there that isn't in the law and called out in the law. But I'm happy to vote on it too if we want to move on from this piece.
Yeah, I would add including professional organizations at the end of here, and then I would call a vote.
Okay, so we have a motion to add from professional organizations. And
I would actually, instead of from, I would just put including so that it's broader. So it's including professional organizations. And to me, all this is stating is that you can, right? If it's age appropriate, right? It's in, if it, whatever, that they can look at those recommendations, but they don't supersede the law. That's all that's stating. It's not saying don't listen to any organizations, don't heed anything outside other than, whatever. It's just saying that they can't take precedence over. So.
Hey, any other questions before we vote? All right, let's vote. Those in favor of adding, including professional organizations, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay, that passes 3-1. The no vote being Board Member Reel. All right.
So I have one other question, and that would be an 11 possibly adding, and maybe Patty can speak to this, I'm not sure, just that local boards, local LEAs often have their own code of conduct, right? would we want to reference that here, just saying, maybe something like, reference LEA's policy on educator standards or code of conduct or whatever, because they're, in addition to ours, well, a lot of local, LEAs have their own code of conduct. Would we want to reference both?
Yeah, so they all have the educator standards on that. But are you referring to the HR code of conduct for employment? Is that what you're referring to?
That's all I'm asking, if we probably need to
Yeah.
include that into, or if the R277, 217 is enough.
The
Yeah,
general code of conduct doesn't address sensitive materials, so I think
Okay.
that you would be going beyond what
Okay.
the general code of conduct would have in it.
I just know that in our previous model policy, it referenced people referring to their own LEA's standards or something. So I just didn't know if that needed to be included here. And if not,
yeah,
that's fine.
I would think those were employment parts that maybe are in there.
Okay,
All
so
right.
no.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I don't know that the state board has before talked about the employment piece of it, the HR piece of it, because that's very distinctly different at LEAs. And that's
But
where
they
I
may, would they have a different, would they have a, yeah, okay. You're just saying it
they
would be
can,
part
they
of our
can become,
guidance.
yeah, they can become more restrictive, but they can't become less restrictive on that. So they would take the educator standards and,
Okay.
the things within all of that. So they can become more restrictive, but not less.
Okay, just because it was in our previous model policy, a reference to it, I didn't know if we needed to reference it again. I'm good with stopping at 10 there.
Okay. All right. So now we're moving on to a new section. This would be Roman numeral 4 or whatever we're on. What's the difference between, so we've called the previous one sensitive material sensitive instructional materials. Now this is called, so we've had so far library materials and something else up above and sensitive instructional materials. And now this next title. Okay. Now this is so this is under that same thing. Is that right?
I'm just wondering if that's what we would rather do if we have a large
I
category.
think it needs to be that. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Do you want to walk us through this, Jenny, this section?
Sure, we can do that. Let me get to where I'm at on the same document with. So you have really, and I'll just talk to this, you have 3 components to the sensitive materials review. You have an initial review that then goes into a full review. Well, I guess maybe there's 2 components, and then the full review has 2 pieces to that. You have the objective sensitive materials and the subjective sensitive materials. So the first thing we're looking at is the initial review underneath the sensitive materials review.
Okay.
Okay, so then underneath there you have, in our rule, we're going to add that it's reviewed by at least 2 employees, makes an initial determination related to plausible claim that the material constitutes, and this needs to be changed. It's not constitutes objective sensitive materials. In the law, it's subjective. Oh, no, sorry. It's just sensitive materials. If they think it constitutes sensitive materials. And I can draw you to that line if I can find it real quick, so that we're on the same provisions. So it'd be around 118, just so I'm making sure I'm getting that right. So it's if it's a sensitive material, and I think you can strike or not, because it's just, is it right? We don't have to put or not in there. And then it's may use excerpts or other evidence to support the allegation. That's from the law. If a plausible claim is substantiated, then the instructional material is immediately removed from the student access in all school settings, and then we need to add at the end of that, until the full review is completed. So until the full review is completed. And that's on line 126.
Okay,
Okay, that's the initial review. That's what takes place. So, and I don't know if there's any changes, modifications to that.
so do we want that last line, that last bullet point, full review is initiated after the completion, or do we just move on out to the full review?
I think you need to, I think it needs to be stated. Just what you're articulating is that after that you've done the initial, then you go to the full review.
Okay,
Anybody want to disagree with me? We don't have. Okay.
If I may clarify,
go ahead.
reviewed by at least 2 LEA employees, that's in the rule. So is 2, do we need 3? Is 2 good? Do we know how we landed on 2?
I do. The law didn't state any at all, and staff felt like it was really difficult to put it on one employee by themselves. So that's why they put at least 2 in the proposed draft of the rule.
Okay, do
The
we feel
statute
like,
doesn't say anything at all regarding who does that.
okay, do we like 2? Do we like the check of 3? Any feedback from anyone?
Well, how some districts have been doing this initial review. Has it primarily, I don't know the numbers on what they've been using. Has it been just a couple of people? Has it been a larger group? I don't know if anyone can speak to that. Maybe Davina knows, I'm not sure.
So I don't know that an initial review has been, I mean, because it's part of this newer law that has been taking place so far. But I mean, my recommendation has been that this shouldn't just be on one person. I've been saying that for 2 years now, that it's just better to have a group make that call together and make sure we're bouncing ideas off of one another and make sure we're all on the same page. That has been my recommendation for 2 years, but I don't know.
Yeah, I like that it's not one. I think I agree with that. I think one person, that's too much. Have we received any feedback from having 2 people? And do we feel like 3 could be more beneficial, or does that add a level of chaos?
So I think at this point, I mean, most of our librarians and employees and administrators that are not working in isolation with this, the feedback I have gotten honestly was asking for 3, just so that if there was needed to be a tiebreaker, there you had a tiebreaker. But that was, I mean, and we've been thinking and talking a lot about like the level of burden this places on LEAs to have more than one person review it. But I just think it's a protection that's needed to make sure we're doing what's best for kids as far as the law is concerned.
So if we, and I don't know what other board members felt, if we wanted that to be 3, technically we'd have to change that in the rule. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, and I understand the odd number piece. I just always get concerned about the resources, the time and staff, and the hours and hours that they spend on this. And so I guess my view is there a way to make it fair, but also not be a huge burden on our LEAs with time and resources to do these? Because I feel like that's something that we've heard from all of our districts and LEAs about how much time, and that includes money because it's staff hours, but also how hard it is to get parents to commit to a lot of the time that it takes to do the review as well. So I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like whatever can be the least of a burden to the LEAs and the parents as well. And Davina, you probably have an answer because you've probably thought about it way more than I have.
Davina, go ahead.
I'm sleep, eating, dreaming, vacationing HB 29. Just kidding. So this section is about the initial review. So we know that we can use excerpts to make that determination. And so I think it's way less extensive of a review than the full review would be, which is going to require more individuals. So I would just like maybe think about that a little bit, just that this could be, I mean, staff, not USBE staff, but LEA staff are already like having these discussions amongst themselves with just a page or a paragraph. So I feel exactly the same way about adding burden to librarians. But I think, and I've heard from the field, that this gives them some peace of mind that it's not just going to be them. And I think there's some public, I think it's important that the public knows that as well, because there has been some, I don't know, vocal, like, did this person make this decision one way or the other, right? It could be either direction, and you make someone mad on this side of the aisle and you make someone mad on this side of the aisle. And so I think having that protection of more than one person, whether it is 2 or 3, I think is important for that rationale as well.
I feel we should support those who are in the hot seat, because I can really feel, I've been feeling the heat intensely in the last little while, and just 1 or 2 people to take the heat with me has made it possible to move on and to continue to function. And so if that would be, I'm thinking of the librarian or those individuals. I don't want to put a burden on LEAs. That's the furthest thing from my mind. So I really resonate with what Sarah is saying, but I also don't want that individual to feel it's me against the world and feeling unsafe, literally. I mean, some people will say things that are just so weird, and excuse me for using a word like that, that are so inappropriate. And it does tend to make you feel like, wow, maybe I should just be done with this and move on to my grandkids, or go back home and not be a librarian anymore. You know, I just want to protect and provide support. So if 3 will do that, and from the field they're saying that, I would recommend that we look at making this something to be considered by the board and board rule as an amendment at some point in the near future. That's not a motion, but that's just my expression of.
Elise has her hand up. I don't know if you can see it because she's
can't.
having to raise it up high. It's her hand, literally.
Please go right ahead, Elise. Sorry.
My literal hand. I just want a little bit of context. So the first is that this is within the rule that we are amending as a committee right now. So if we wanted to change it to 3, that is perfectly within your power to do that today. The second part is that the same conversation happened. I think it was Michelle and Angie and I discussing this issue. And we have also brought this up with attorneys from the field as well as superintendents, and the feeling was supportive of this language with the at least 2. That way it gives, for our smaller districts that don't really have as much of a problem maybe, or if they don't feel like it's as much of an issue, they can just do the 2 with the resources that they have. But those larger districts, or if there is more heat coming from the public for whatever reason, then they can definitely do 3. So that was kind of the thinking behind that the at least 2 gives a nod to 3 would probably be great, but if you can't, 2 is also legal. So
I appreciate that background information. Thank you so much. So
Here's the thought.
board members, what do you think?
What if we gave them an option?
2 or 3?
So if we said 2 or 3, and that way smaller LEAs, if they need to be more flexible, they can at least have 2, or if they feel like they need to have 3 based on some of the instances we've talked about, then they could have 3.
I like that.
Yeah,
Any
we can
other
do that.
thoughts?
The way it's worded now is it says you can be by at least 2, which implies that you could have 3, 5, right? I think you would want to go low, but we can add 2 or 3. It just is, it becomes restrictive though. But I don't think it needs to be more than that though, to be honest
I
with
take
you.
back what I said then. Oh, yeah, okay. Whatever gives them flexibility based on their own needs, right? If they're a district that only gets one book, like it's not like has had so few books brought forward for review that it's not a huge time and resource for them, then they should maybe only have 2, or they are happy having 5 just to be safe. So whatever is going to give them the most flexibility, I think, but definitely the minimum of 2, I think is important there.
I think that looks great. Reviewed by at least 2, and then they can go upwards from there if they feel the need. But I really appreciate the fact that the librarian doesn't have to feel it's me against the world without any other people to commiserate with and discuss with and go through the review process. That's good. Let's continue. So that's the initial review. We're now ready to look at the full review.
Okay, so under the full review, keep in mind it goes to through the objective sensitive materials review first, right? So just, that's what you got to have in mind. So under this, determine a transparent process, including a time frame for evaluating the allegation, selection process, structure, and documentation for the review. And I spoke with Emily yesterday. I don't know if she has different language, but also want to make sure that these individuals have training on the current legal requirements. So it's not just here, if you're coming to here, you know what I mean? Come and do this. And then it's not, here's the legal requirements. And maybe most districts are doing that, but I think in spelling that out, I don't think we, that there's harm in that, to just make sure that and maybe that's part of the structure, but that they're just, receive training on the current legal requirements. So I'd add that in. Emily, did you have a different language maybe, or is that work?
No, that was my concern, and I just thought that it would add a level of quality that everybody that's involved with this process, kind of like a standard, they understand, and it makes it, in my opinion, it makes things more efficient because they've done that training before they start reviewing. So it's at the front of their mind. They know what the law is. They know what they need to be looking for. And when that happens, if anything jumps out of the page, they're aware of it. I just think it gives quality, helps things be more efficient. And for every library throughout the state of Utah, they understand what it is that is needed and required and what they're looking for. So yeah, I would love if we could add that.
So
Please.
after structure, if we could add training on the current legal requirement. Okay. And then designate an LEA contact person for reporting and corresponding with the state library specialist. I didn't know if we wanted to spell out library specialist. We put superintendent, but where this is guidance, it would be coming from our library specialist. Davina, I don't know if, or Michelle, someone have it needs to be this language on that one?
I don't have any guidance on that one. I think it's fine to say the state library specialist, even though the rule says superintendent, because it's just drilling down in the guidance.
Okay.
And I was just going to say my title is library media specialist, but I don't think it matters, but just if it does.
Yeah, we can put that in.
Good.
Okay. And then the next one, and designate 3 or more members, including one parent, and may include the designees from the initial review for the objective sensitive materials review using the objective sensitive materials standards. Now, maybe you guys can figure a way to write that. Non-repetitive there, but it is the objective sensitive materials review, and you have to use the standard, and the standard's just listed there. Just calling out, you can use, and I heard this when I reached out to a few people, that if we're going to have an initial review, that just that, for the resources purpose, you know, making sure there's at least a parent on this, and then it could be the 2 employees, or it could be 2 new ones. The district can decide on that, so we're not stretching resources in some of our smaller LEAs to where they're having to come up with all these different groups. So. Okay. And then under the objective, they may use excerpts or evidence to support the allegations submitted during the initial review. If the instructional material constitutes objective sensitive material, the review process is completed and the instructional material is immediately removed from all school settings.
And should that objective sensitive material be bolded as we did earlier in the document?
Yeah, probably anywhere we have it in here, it probably needs to be that. And then report the outcomes to the submitter and the public. And then this next part, and I know it's going to take us a little discussion, but I have the LEA designee reports the determination of the state library media specialist within, and I think in our rule we have 20 days after, and okay, so here's where I'm going with this. We may have to, the question becomes, after the what's the language in the law? Sorry, I'm looking here. A final determination is what it says in the law. It's included after, so it's on line, just so for those of you who are following, line 146, that's all wrapped together. So you have, it's section 4, which has to do with the initial, the objective, the subjective, and then on line D, or 145, 146, it says communicate the, the allegation and the LEA final determination regarding the allegation and the challenge instructional material. And this isn't going to make much sense because my language here, but I'm trying to figure out, when do they report to us? Right? Does it go through appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal, or is it when they finish this initial process that would be the final determination? So it's sent to us. An appeal can still take place, but is this where that final determination is recognized, if that makes sense?
From a legal perspective, they wouldn't be reporting it until all of their appeals had expired, which includes the opportunity to appeal if a person chose not to appeal. So until the appeals process was completed at the district level, they wouldn't be reporting it to the State Board of Education.
So then we're going to run into problems of just one appeal after another appeal after another appeal, because they can just continue to appeal. So then it actually subverts or goes around the law and becomes a game instead of an actual outcome.
Their process should say what their final appeal is, so they can't keep appealing forever. Their process should say this appeal is the final administrative appeal.
Okay, so then we would have to spell that out. And the only reason why I'm saying that is because it allows for them to continue to appeal and reconsider, right?
I
So
don't
is it
see where
the
that
initial?
happens.
What's that? Sorry, Michelle.
I don't see where a continued appeal and appeal happens. There's only the appeal to their board, and their board makes the final determination for that LEA.
Okay, and maybe I just need some clarification then on line.
It's line 149 is where they're able to appeal to their local governing board.
Yes, but down here on line 155, it says an LEA governing board may not enact rules or policies that prevent an LEA governing board from revisiting a previous decision, reviewing a recommendation, considering a challenge material if the LEA governing board receives additional information. So that you're not considering that as a possible appeal. That's something separate.
That's a good question, but I see that as being something separate, because it says, or if the only way they can do that is if the LEA governing board receives additional information regarding the material.
Okay, or revisiting a previous decision. Would that not apply to the appeal then?
Yes, it would.
Do you see what I'm saying then? So it leaves this continuous loop open, at least in my mind. Maybe I'm misreading this.
That does make it difficult. I understand where you're coming from. So putting a timeline when an appeal has been decided, when the LEA board has decided an appeal.
And is there a good recommendation for the timeline?
That's where, see, that's where I'm struggling.
Like what's
If-
reasonable?
Yeah, if we title it as an initial appeal, and once that's finished, if it happens at all, right, then that's where it comes to us. Otherwise, because of the way the law is written, it just could be revisited time and time again.
Right. Yeah. And then it's just a circle.
Yeah, then we end up with a
Um,
new law next year. And I don't,
Yeah. And so I think you're right. Remember, Earl, I just am wondering what that timeline looks like. That's reasonable.
I don't know, and that's where I was struggling. I have some language here and I have some language down below, and it just, I could never settle it exactly. That's why I went back up and said, where does it actually say that it has to be sent to the state board? And that's under the top section, not under the appeal. And that's why I was trying to figure that out, Michelle, if a final determination, where that actually.
It would be when the LEA board makes a determination. So it would have to be every time that they made a determination, they would need to, within 10 days, inform the library media specialist.
Okay.
After each
Well, I have
determination.
initial determination appeal, but it doesn't, that's my language. I just was trying to figure out the complication there. It doesn't have to be there.
I think
So
it should
it's
say
probably-
after a final determination.
Yeah,
has
that's
been
what it needs to be.
And stick with what it says in the code after a final determination has been made. You do want it to say determination so that they're telling you either way. They have to inform you either way, whether it was found to need to be removed or whether it was stayed. They need to inform the library media specialist either way because it says that they have to inform of the determination. Not just whether they uphold the objective sensitive material of determination. You need to know either way if they overturned it as well.
Yeah, so and I'm just trying to make sure. So anytime there's a final determination is sent on.
Yes.
Okay. So we wouldn't put the appeal in there. It would just be, we just have to indicate that if appeal occurs, then that final determination is sent on.
Yes.
Am I saying that right? And maybe we'll have to. keep
Yeah,
thinking
so
about this
anytime
after
there's
the
a
fact.
final determination. Yeah, anytime there's a final determination, which may be multiple times on one
Okay,
material.
so let's see, media specialist. 10
If they
days.
revisit it, like you mentioned
Yeah.
down further in the bill. If they
Yes,
revisit it and made a final determination on that, revisiting it, they would need to inform at 10 days after that determination.
okay. All right. Are we done thinking through that? I think it's going to come up again in the next piece, so we may have to revisit this. I do have one other question. If someone actually purchased the material, should they be on, and this is just kind of one of those conflict of interest, and maybe we need to think about that a little bit. If someone actually purchased the items, can they be on a vetting review panel? Does that make sense?
So you mean if the librarian ordered the materials, the librarian
Yes.
couldn't be on the review
Wouldn't,
committee?
I would think so, because to me, there would be an inherent conflict of interest because they secured the items in the first place. You would want an independent entity to, because they made the recommendation coming into the school, Or if another group made a recommendation, they couldn't be on the, so maybe we've got to state something in here about panel members cannot have a conflict. Maybe that's up in the general provisions or something, because it could impact all three of these areas, right? If you're putting someone on there that actually made the decision to put the item into the school, we end up with a problem if we're having that person make a decision to whether or not it stays, because they made the initial decision for it to be there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a confusing part.
So let's, anyways, we can come back to that, but I don't know if, Elise, will you just star that, maybe make a note somewhere at the bottom or something, just that conflict of interest, making sure we kind of address that at some point.
And at least put in the chat the question of if it needs to be in the rule.
I think it would need to. Just that they're really, we don't want a conflict in this area because that puts that person at risk too, right? So, okay.
Well, I think it also really highlights how all of this, it helps us further understand how all of this is happening in the first place. Like if we're sincerely missing the ability to check what is coming in, it helps us understand that a little bit better. And then again, helps us be able to put things in place that allow, quality materials to continue to be put into our libraries. So anyway, I kind of see that being a conflict of interest being on that panel. So I would also like to not just let this fall under the radar, but do we need to address that now? And when we say, we'll think about that, like, when do we get back to it?
No, that's what I'm saying. It starts so that we can put it in the right place.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I just asked it. Elise, did you add it to the bottom? She just added it to the bottom of the document so we don't lose it.
Okay. Okay, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, where are we? So let me read that again. The LEA designee reports the determination to the state library media specialist within 10 days after a final determination was made. Okay, I feel good about that. We'll just have to indicate that there's different times when a determination can be made, right? Final determination. Okay, if the objective sensitive material standard is not
We
upheld.
want to add in each time or every time a final determination, I don't know. Within 10 days, each time a final determination has been made. So that they understand that there are, it may be several.
After each final determination, is that what
Yeah, something like that.
is made? Or has been made?
Yeah, we do need the has or is.
Okay. If the objective sensitive material standard is not upheld, initiated subject, yep, that's when you go on to the next one. The LEA shall facilitate the prompt return or disposal of materials identified for removal. Sensitive materials removed. And Michelle brought up, I'd attach this because it's had a change in the law, but she said it would probably be better to reference because you actually have to show harm in this one. Is that right, Michelle? For this?
Yes,
right?
you have to be able to show that there was medical or emotional harm to the student or to the child, the minor, for doing it.
So it may be better to reference our educator standards right there. So R277, 217, because they can't provide them with these materials according to our legal standard. So let me see if I had any other notes. I think that was it on that section for me. I don't know if others had notes on there.
Board members, do you have any other additional?
So address the conflict of interest. I still think that needs to go up in the general because it applies to all of the sections. what's the language we would want there? So someone that has secured something, I don't know, I'm getting the language right, but anybody that's, an individual that has secured the challenged materials may not participate in the review process. A review process, any review process, maybe that's the better.
Is the word procured?
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't, is it always procured?
I don't know.
What would the word be? Because let's say it's not purchased, let's say it's donated, is that procuring? Maybe it is. Davina, what language
We
would that
said
be?
approved. Approved the
Okay.
challenged materials. Initially approved.
I like procured.
Okay.
Librarians are, I mean, I think we did a math calculation, a couple years back. It would be physically impossible for every librarian to read every material that comes into the library. And so they probably, I don't know that they know every single content that's in a book, and they do their best, but and so that's why I like, because I don't know that they're approving it necessarily. That's why I like procured. The other thing to think about is that this potentially may remove any librarian from participating in a review. And that I say that because let's say a book was purchased in this library. It's oftentimes that the books are purchased across the district, so every school may have that book. And so by saying that the person who procured the materials, are we also saying that if it was challenged at this school, then any librarian who has that book in their library because they chose that book wouldn't be able to participate in a review process?
Well, I think it's just that, did they choose the book to be there? And I just have to argue one point. It used to be that you're right, we couldn't have read all the materials, right? And gotten through everything. Anymore though, there are summaries of most books that we're having concerns with. So I think a librarian's got to be more vigilant, and I'm sure they are, about what's being secured for the school itself. And there's easy ways to do that now, where I think it may not have been the case just a few years ago.
I think they are probably being more, taking more time to do that. But a summary doesn't always tell you everything. I've had librarians tell me that they read a summary, the book came, and then it had more content than they knew. And I had experience with that, where I got a book from Barnes and Noble and I gave it away to my librarians, and they were tittering in the back, and I returned the book to Barnes and Noble. This was 3 or 4 years ago. So it happens where a summary doesn't give you it doesn't give you a full, complete view of what's in the book.
I agree with that. I was pointing out, sorry, I'm here by Hill Air Force Base, was that they may not, the idea that they don't have any knowledge about the book and that there's no accountability. And I'm not saying you're saying that, but the idea that we live in a time when it's easy to access information about things, and it's not, you can easily say these books are on the high concern list. We should be aware of these. So there just shouldn't be things slipping through like there were a few years ago.
And I just want us to think through, what this sentence means if it is going to say that no librarian could be a part of the process. So I totally understand exactly what you're saying, Jenny, and I agree. It's really, the selection of books is really, really important to librarians and to the school needs of the students.
Deputy Superintendent Norman, you had a comment.
Yeah, this one went back to the original word. As I looked it up, the word procured in Webster's dictionary, just Merriam-Webster, it means to obtain something, or to get possession of something, to obtain something by particular care and effort. So for some reason in my head, I was thinking purchase. And so I just wanted to make sure it didn't mean purchase, but it's the person who gets possession of the thing or obtains that in there for that word. The word secured has a different meaning about the security of something. And so I just going back to that initial question that was on there. And then I think the secondary question that you're discussing now is whether the librarian can be a part of that final review.
Thank you. Any comments from?
And one more thing, because I'm the timekeeper here, we have 14 minutes left till noon, and we are doing good. This is good work. So going through this, we haven't got to the rule yet or the second item on the agenda as well. So I just wanted to give like a time so that you can discuss maybe where you want to go with this, finish this up, if people can stay on a little bit longer. Anyways, I just wanted
I
to.
thought it was scheduled till 1.
Yeah, I thought it was 1 too. That's what it said on the invitation. 9 to 1.
Have it on the calendar invite from 9 to noon. Let's double check with Jerry and Andrea.
And let's check on Civic Clerk too.
Okay.
And see
all
what
right.
the public notice was.
I'll do that really quick.
So one other just item with this, I don't think it eliminates librarians while we're kind of looking at the other, but I think if you're saying one person is purchasing for the district, then, which is the possibility, right? That someone's purchasing some books for the district, but whoever did the initial securing of it, just really shouldn't be on there. And I think it's to protect that person too, to be honest with you.
Yes, you're correct. It could be that a district at the secondary level, it's usually the school librarian procuring books for that library. At the elementary level, it varies. So we might have a district person that purchases for the entire elementary libraries, and we might have a school librarian that purchases for their own. What I was referencing was that if this was a book that was in every library, would it be considered that because any librarian that had that book, that they wouldn't be able to participate in a review process? And maybe I'm belaboring a point that doesn't need to be belabored. I just don't want to eliminate them from the conversation as a whole, if that makes sense. Like, I wouldn't want to create a generalization that no librarian, and would this sentence do that? I'm wondering.
I just think it's that initial procurement piece. If they're the ones that brought it in, then they already did the review already, right? So
Well, and
that's
I
the
think
concern.
that's something I've been trying to figure out the whole time. Like a business has a purchasing department. And what they do is they go in and they look at their inventory needs, and they make their purchases that they send out. When that is received, and you have your receiving department, they scan it, that they got it from the delivery man, and then they scan that inventory and they go stock the shelves. So I would assume that there's that level that exists. There's somebody that is creating an order for the inventory that's coming to the schools as it relates specifically to library books and materials. And I guess this does fall into other books that are being ordered. But as far as the librarians go, who is the purchasing department? Who's the purchasing manager that looks at what inventory needs to be ordered and goes in and selects, we need 30 books of this, we need 7 books of that, we need this. If that doesn't come organically from an order form from a librarian, is that list procured from an outside organization or vendor? And I actually
Can
like
we
to
put
know.
a pause on that for just 1 second and check with Andrea to see if she has some information on the length of this meeting?
Yes.
I think it was publicly noted to go until 1 p.m. So, and we should be able to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Back to your question, Emily. Thank you. I'm sorry for the interruption.
Well, I was gonna, on Member Green's comment. So I always think about some of the librarians that I've talked to from different LEAs. And one librarian says that if a student comes in and requests a book, a student can come in and request a book. And just to give respect to these librarians, is this one librarian in particular says that she reads every single book that's ever requested before she considers putting it in the library, right? So she's really thorough about that process. And so I do wonder on this procurement part, because every LEA, every district is going to have a different process on how they buy them. A lot of it comes down to budget. How much budget does that librarian have? And how much budget do they have to spend each year, right? And that'll vary from LEA to LEA. And so if there isn't anything in the law that talks about who can and cannot participate in these reviews, right? And so again, I just don't want to be narrowing, because there might be, even though the main person, the main librarian of that, maybe the specialist of the district or the librarian in the school or whatever it may be overall responsible for all the materials, doesn't mean it's something that they can't participating in the review process and have a unbiased view of those different materials that may come through on a lower level. Let's say it's a district library specialist, and then it's someone that is at a school that actually purchased it. So if this is, again, just back to my initial piece, was like, if it's something that isn't in the law and I feel like this is just a guiding document to help our LEAs understand the law. If it's something that is too narrowing, I would say we could just exclude it in that sense, because I don't want to be limiting on what the situation is at each LEA as well.
I think it would need to go into our rule. And I actually do like this provision. Just for that, it's an accountability factor. It's like, if you're going to put it in, once again, I think it's a protection for those that are procuring or, getting the materials. It allows to other employees to say, yes, this is good, or no, this is not. So
I understand that, but how do you determine who is the person responsible, right? Because overall, there might be individuals above that, the library specialist that brought it in, that could be considered responsible, and it just is
that's right.
a
So
little bit up
that
to interpretation.
Yeah, it wouldn't exclude that librarian then if someone else put it in, right? It would exclude the district person though from participating, but not the local librarian if the district person is the one that put it in. So it's that initial procurement.
I was thinking of it in the reverse. Like if it's the district person is actually responsible for all the librarians and all of their schools within that district or LEA, then does that mean they're also excluded? Because they're technically the ones that are responsible for the decisions that the LEAs at the lower level, or the librarians at the lower levels make. And so that's why it's just like, it becomes a little bit confusing on who that means.
Well, and that's why I keep asking the question. I'd really like it to be answered if somebody here could answer this. We have a purchasing department. They have a name that they sign when they purchase an order. We have a receiving department. They sign when they receive the order. We have people that stock the shelves. They have a number. We know who stocks the shelves. This exists within the school system. Who orders the books? If we don't order the books, what organization gives us the list of books that we receive?
That's kind of what I was saying, is sometimes a student can request a book be added to the library in some cases. So I just think all of our LEAs are so different sizes, different situations. And is it the person who is the budget manager of that LEA that's responsible, or is it the person that put in the order? And everyone's going to have a different process within their LEA.
I don't know.
That's why I don't want to cause that confusion.
Could we have your comment, please?
Just in response to the who on this, it was just answered as I was putting my hand down, which is, it's a multitude of people. It depends on, because this entire guideline, or this entire guiding document, is instructional materials. It's not just library materials. So if we look at it, it could be a teacher, they could be ordering off what are those book orders that come home for, and they're ordering books for their classroom or whatnot. So there could be a variety of people on there. I think, and I'm wondering, Davina, if you have any more information on on the process specifically for procuring, I know that the librarian doesn't procure all the materials, all of the instructional materials. I know that the classroom teacher doesn't do that as well. And I know that the district actually is the one who does, like, let's say, curriculum, and then they do other materials as well. So there's different levels of who procures, and what that looks like. That might be something that in looking at this, maybe we can just think that through a little bit more. I know that all of you are amazing board members, but I don't know that we're going to get through this and the rule in the next hour, but you could. But with that being said, maybe we can just put a placeholder on that one, or because I don't know that we as staff have that full information.
Yeah. And I understand what Member Reel's saying as far as like, there's just so many moving parts to this. I absolutely agree. I understand this. At the end of the day, in a business, you know who ordered product. You know who placed the order. You know what inventory you need. You know what's coming in. And those structures exist in every single school. So that's, yes, maybe it's cumbersome at first, but they already have all of that in place because their building is operating. Somebody already has that as their job description, period. And so for me, it seems manageable and expected. If you don't have those, you're probably not functioning very well. But our schools are functioning. Bookshelves are full. Curriculum is in classroom. People are already doing this. Yes, Davina.
I just was going to add also, some of our librarians are inheriting their library. So the books that are in the library are from a predecessor. And so that may also make this a little bit more complicated. I'll just say that.
Except for that actually clears it up because they are not the initial person that put it in. Does that make sense? They didn't put it in. So this to me is that initial person. And if a student comes in and says, get me this book, the student didn't get the book, the adult got the book and has the measurement tool to know whether or not it's something they can actually get. So I still think it's that initial, right? If you have inherited a library, you're not the initial person, right? And as you go through the deselection process or whatever, you'll be able to identify those items, but it's who's bringing them in is the concern here.
I mean, we can call this one to a vote again.
Okay, what are you proposing?
Proposing that we list that as an amendment there to add that level, that if.
Can you see it okay?
And I have, I'm a little conflicted, but at the end of the day, this thing's run away with everybody. So we'll rein it in until we can figure it out and get a hold on what's going on.
Yeah, I am like 100% there with you, Member Green. Like, I get it. Like, we should find the person and they should not be allowed to participate. All I'm saying is that all of these LEAs have it's just, it is a little bit confusing as a guideline to the law for LEAs to interpret what that means. And that's my point. Not that we shouldn't allow the person who had the book to be on the, I get that. I get the part that they shouldn't be allowed to participate in the review process. And I totally get what Member Earl's saying. I'm just saying with these guidelines, I want to be able to give LEAs no room for having weird interpretations of how the guidelines are written. And I want them to be helpful, not confusing. And this falls more into the confusing part for me than it does on the helpful part.
So how would we change it so that it wouldn't be confusing?
Chair Elise has her hand up. Maybe she has the solution.
That would be awesome. Go right ahead.
One option, like we had a similar discussion about getting rid of materials after they've been deemed to not be allowed in the schools. What we did was added to the requirement that an LEA shall adopt a policy. They need to consider XYZ about getting rid of the materials, maybe we put in a similar clause that in developing an individual LEA policy, they shall consider, this person not be on their committees. And then that way they can make that determination because they have a better handle on who is
So I
actually.
guess we could frame it as someone that has a conflict of interest kind of a thing. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that maybe in an LEA policy, they need to have a conflict of interest clause in their policy. And we can leave it at the LEA's decision on what that looks like, but.
I feel better about that.
Local control is a good thing. But to
Yes.
specify specifically, this must be included, so take care of business. I like that. How do you feel, Emily?
I guess I mean, it's an option. My goal is to really be able to isolate why this has become a problem, how that material is ordered and received and paid for is the problem for me. And somebody is responsible for that, or has the responsibility for that. And that's where if no one's going to ever be responsible for anything, we'll just play this sing and dance all day.
Well, I think that if we do it in the conflict of interest way, though, it does allow for all the different scenarios of who that person is you're talking about. Because we can't say in a narrow way who that is at each LEA, because they could name something different. They could be in a different role. And so I think putting it in as like, no one with a conflict of interest in the materials, it, can be on part of the review processes, allows for all of the different scenarios of who that person is that's responsible at each LEA, rather than trying to determine who that is.
So if I were to run through, is a conflict of interest, does that fall under your job?
So if a parent donated
to procure a list.
I mean, a parent could donate a pile of books to the library and that could be the parent, right? It could be so many different scenarios based on who brought the book in. And I'm not saying we shouldn't hold anyone responsible. I'm just saying we can't narrowly define that in a way in these guidelines that's going to be helpful. So just saying that any individual that may have a conflict of interest with the procurement of the book should not be allowed to participate in the review process. Leaves that more open for all of the different scenarios at the different LEAs.
Okay, so I liked what you just said, because you're verbalizing where I'm trying to sort it out with the conflict of interest concept. How can procuring the materials be a conflict of interest if that's your job description?
Well, it's not a conflict of interest with actually doing the work that you do, but it is a conflict of interest with this review process. Does that make sense?
So it's a conflict of the review process.
Exactly.
So your job was to
I can't participate in this review process because my job, or what I did in my job, doesn't allow me to make an unbiased decision regarding the review of this sensitive material.
What if it said an individual that sorry, I had it, and then I just got interrupted by someone. That an LEA shall develop a policy. Yeah, write it down there as a possibility. An LEA shall develop a policy related to conflict of interest and procurement in association with the review committees. I don't know, something like that.
There's another type of conflict of interest. For example, the parent who put the challenge there has a conflict of interest, and they shouldn't be on the review committee.
They shouldn't be on the.
So if you broadened it to conflict of interest, it would encompass both the person who procured it and the person who is objecting to the materials not being allowed to be on the review process.
I think that,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying.
Beautiful. How do you feel, Emily?
Better.
Better, good. All right.
okay, so so we're looking at using that second piece of language then. And it could be more expansive than that too, possibly, right? Someone who's out posting something on, an employee would be discounted too if they're out there saying, oh, I love X, Y, and Z, and then they get on the committee and they're not really fair in their evaluation. Would that be accurate? Okay, that's what I would move, is that the parentheses part replace the other part, so.
Okay, so can I read this?
Please do.
An LEA shall develop a policy related to conflict of interest and procurement in association with the review committee. Example, those responsible for procurement. And we'll finish that part. Okay, so the gist of it, an LEA shall develop a policy related to conflict of interest and procurement in association with the review committee.
Maybe it needs to be an association with membership of the review, a membership on a review committee or something. So it's real specific, not just associated with them, but.
Yeah.
First procurement be left
Select,
out
no.
because it's in the examples. Like it just says related to a conflict of interest in association with a review committee. Those responsible for procurement or the individual who brought the challenge. So you're leaving those a list of examples that could be a conflict of interest.
Response?
I'm thinking.
So it's kind of like jury selection is what we're talking about. So,
I'm just
So-
hoping in another year we have very few of these.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the preemptive stuff at the beginning reflects in the rest of this, right? That we have all this other stuff, but we don't really have to use it because we figured out that we get to have a say in what goes in our schools, and we're in charge of that.
Here's one more concern that comes back to procurement, which I still haven't received an answer to, and I'd like an answer. And if it's not today, if anybody that knows this can get back to us. Are we physically procuring our order forms for the books that come to our libraries? Or do we receive procured orders that are delivered automatically to the schools? If the second is the case as a standard in our working relationship with these vendors, then in essence, it's the distributors that can't be on the committee.
Okay, let's get some
Can
further
we answer that?
information from Davina. What do you have to say to that?
I think the standard generally is that books are being, it's not a list or like a box of books that shows up at the library. The standard is that the librarians, educators, district people use the selection criteria of their policy to select books for their libraries and classroom libraries.
Do we know, do districts ever receive orders procured from vendors that they did not solicit themselves?
I'm trying to think. In my library, I had a local bookstore donate books to me, but I would go through that box differently than I would go through a box of books. And that was rare. I would say in 5 years in that library, I probably got 2 boxes of books from them. There's no procurement, maybe this never happened to me. And as a district librarian, I never had any of my libraries that I knew of that were getting like boxes of books sent to them from vendors or publishers.
Davina, what about the book bundles? I know a couple of years ago, those were real popular. Bundle a whole bunch of books and you bought a certain grouping. Are those not taking place anymore?
I'm not hearing about I never actually have ever experienced that myself as a district librarian supervising libraries
Yeah.
or in the library. I have heard about what you're talking about, but I personally have not. In a large district, that was not something that was commonplace.
And do we give recommendation at the state level that that's probably not a really great idea? Right?
No.
Okay.
no.
So it's safe to say then that in our local school districts, there are specific people that are physically procuring orders of books that are delivered and received at their schools.
As opposed to a publisher, is that what you're referencing? There, yes, we have staff, educators, librarians that are purchasing books. I would say that's the norm. It's individuals at schools and districts that are purchasing materials using selection criteria policies to do so.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Okay,
I'm
so
good with the way it is right now. It may get a little bit of a tweak by board meeting, but I think I'm comfortable with this currently.
great.
And-
Let's
and
move on to
Pat-
the next little bit.
And I was going to say, Vice Chair Green, if you would like more, like further information on that question, we can get some before the next meeting. We can get with Adam Hurd as well about procurement or even with the librarians.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great. I think that would be very helpful.
Thank
you.
Right. So the next part of it, how much more of this do we have? How many more sections? Okay, sensitive material review. So the last title was what? Let's see. Oh,
It
now
should
we're
have been-
breaking.
Yeah, it should have been the objective material review, and this one's subjective. So this is, if it doesn't pass the one, it moves on. Or if it is identified as an objective sensitive material, then it's removed. And if not, then it goes through this process. This is secondary. So determine a transparent process. Okay, we need to include that other language here about training on the law, whatever we had up above. So, yep. And then allow student access with parent consent. That's with the law. Determine who will review the material, ensuring school community parents are included in the process. And that's the only thing it spells out there, and each district has their own nuances on how they're doing that. And then use the subjective sensitive material standard. And then I just put the standard right there so it's spelled out. And then may use other criteria like violence, vulgarity, self-harm, etc. So they can include more components into that review, because that's a broader review than the first one. They're looking for very specific things. If the instructional material constitutes subjective sensitive material, ensure the material is inaccessible. So if it is, okay, so we probably need, if the instructional material constitutes, so maybe it is determined, because that's the language we've been using, is determining subject is, if the, how do we word that? If the subjective sensitive material is determined to be, okay, if that works. If that's the case, then we need to ensure that the material is inaccessible to students in the school setting, including the determination of the parent consent. The LEA designee reports the determination to the state library media specialist within 10 days of the final determination. We need to put the final in there. report the outcomes to the submitter and public, and then the LEA shall facilitate the prompt return, same thing as up above, and then we need to change the reference from 78B to R277 217. Okay, any questions there? It's similar to the other one, except for it changes the group. And it also.
And adds subjective in there, right?
Yeah, subjective, as well as it adds that broader analysis, right?
Okay, we need to take a 5-minute break
Okay,
so that we can share the doc. And so let's take 5 minutes and we will reconvene at 12:22
okay.
or thereabouts. Knowing this group, who knows when it'll.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. See you in 5.
How are we doing? Are we getting close?
I'm
We
back.
are good. Thank you, everyone.
Terrific. All right. We've got 2 board members. But I'm not seeing everybody for some. Did we lose Emily?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm here.
Thanks, Sarah. All righty. Let's continue. Where were we?
I think we're on the subjective sensitive materials. If there was, I don't know if there's anybody that had a recommendation there.
Are we sharing the screen again? I'm not
Elise,
seeing.
yeah, Elise, will you share again? Thank you.
Right, thank you.
I didn't have any other changes. Oh, other than, oh yeah, Elliot does it. Nope, that's all I had. I'm just looking back at my notes from what I sent. Was making sure we had the training requirement in there. Unless there's others that someone has, if not, we can go to the appeals. So on the appeals, employee, student, parent, and governing board members of a relevant LEA may initiate an appeal regardless of if the material was retained or removed. This is according to law. The LEA governing board reviews the appeal, shall vote in a public board meeting to decide the outcome of a sensitive material review appeal, clearly identifying the board's rationale for the decision and the board's determination for each component of the statutory and any additional policy standards the board uses to reach the board's conclusion. Now, I put this on here originally because this next part.
Oh no, she froze.
Are you frozen?
Board member Earl, you're frozen.
She gets frozen in decent looking faces. I always get frozen in weird ones.
You look very sophisticated
I
there.
know. All of this is the new
Final determination. We need to use that language of the appeal.
You might have to start over because you were frozen for a long time.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. So sorry. Okay, tell me where I was at. So we need to probably, originally when I was looking at that appeal piece, I was trying to figure out how that notification came about. So I think that may contact state board member can be taken off. It doesn't fit under clearly identifying. It doesn't work there. So that can be removed. But I would add something about sending the final determination to that piece, wherever we have that.
Within 10 days and all that stuff like before. The determination. Mhm.
I think she's frozen again. My question while we're waiting for her to come back, are all of these the new pieces from the new law? The appeals process section, is that all new?
And she's still frozen.
And Sarah, I don't know if this is new specifically. I'm so sorry.
I believe some of it is and some of it is not, which is totally unhelpful.
Thank you. So
Hi, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay.
So before,
And she is
before it
unfrozen.
said, before it said parents who are reflective of the members of the school's community were supposed to be part of it, but they were part of the sensitive materials review, not the subjective sensitive material review. And so that's why Elise is saying part of it is new and part of it is not.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to designate which parts are new so they know which parts of their policy to
So
update.
now
So
we need to go back and do the highlights that we started a long time ago, and then we kind of got sidetracked.
and I'd also trust staff to do that
Yeah,
after.
staff could do that. Most of
that's
it
great.
is highlighted. There's just a handful of things that aren't. So,
Excellent point. We certainly trust staff. They're awesome.
okay. And then the other part of this, so the end of this would be the LEA governing board may not enact rules or policies that prevent the LEA governing board from, and then it lists those 3 things there, which are also in our rule. So, and then the other, because I'm trying to think what an LEA needs to do, not what we need to do, but on the statewide well, actually, if there's any, I'll wait, if there's any changes in that.
Any changes? Seeing no
Okay.
hands, we can go on.
Okay, and then on the statewide, state superintendent will notify local LEAs of a statewide removal of sensitive material within 10 days of the threshold, of the threshold being met. And I put state superintendent, that's probably where it needs to stay. Would you agree, instead of the library specialist? Because it could be someone besides Davina that notifies, right? I don't know. Should we just leave state superintendent? Or do we want that more specific, I guess is my question.
I would think you would want it to be state superintendent so that they could do it through their communications policy.
Okay, okay.
Thank
And
you.
then the LEA notification for statewide removal of sensitive materials applies to all LEAs and all school settings. If the statewide removal is overturned, as outlined in our code, an LEA may choose to return the given material to student access, or may choose to uphold their determination to remove a sensitive material from the school setting in their LEA. So those are the options, and that's the items I had, unless anybody else had something to add to it.
I think it looks good.
Okay, we could probably vote then.
All right. You want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that what did we title this after all at the end? Did we change the title at all? I make a motion that the committee moves the instructional materials guidance document on draft 1 on first reading and forwards it to the board for second and final reading. Oh, yep, Elise.
All right, do we also need to include that giving staff direction to make technical and
Including giving staff direction to make technical, grammatical, and highlighting changes. Does that
All
work?
right. We have a motion before us that was very well articulated, and it included the staff making those technical adjustments to make it in perfect condition for the full board's review and approval. Any further discussion regarding this motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 I heard 4 voices. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, so we've done that one. Do we want to look at the rule now? Is that where we should head?
That's what's the next part on the agenda is moving from this guidance document to the rule.
Let's look at it.
Okay. All right, Elise is going to be pulling that up. And Elise, do you want to give any background moving forward with the rule, where we're at and what's uploaded?
Okay, so if you recall, last time we started with draft 1, board member Earl brought forward draft 2, and that's what the committee was working on when we adjourned the meeting last time. So in Civic Clerk, there is that original draft that board member Earl provided, and then there's an additional draft 2 that includes the amendments that were made by the committee before officially adopting draft 2. So that's the one we were going to start with, as long as that's okay with everyone.
That's great. Let's do that.
I think do we need an official, we don't need an official motion for that, right? That we would be working from that draft? Okay.
Okay, good. Let's go ahead.
Elise, do you want me to share? Or are you going to share and make edits as we go? We still have the instructional material up.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. All right, I'll go back to the beginning. I believe that we were in.
Can we go up? I just have a couple of things to possibly add because of the guidance document. So if you go down to 45 roughly, line 45. So right, yes, right there, where it, the third section, just where it says, can I ask specifically, what is the federal law that we're referencing here? What federal law is relevant? Or laws, I just hate to put federal law in there, but not actually know what it is. We know what it is with state law because we can articulate those. What federal law tells us what goes in libraries or instruction materials?
Constitution.
The Constitution, and what in the Constitution?
There are First Amendment rights of access to it that apply more to secondary or higher education than they do to public education, but there have been some challenges on removal of books based on constitutional challenges. So you could choose and say this rule is really intended to make things consistent with state law.
I think that's
the
where I'd
point
like
of this rule.
Yeah, I'd like to sit because the plurality ruling with PICO isn't really, it's a kind of a conglomeration of things. So
You're
it's
right.
not really clear on what federal law we're really referencing. So I would actually just say consistent with state law, Utah law. That's what the rule's intended to do. Unless there's any clarification we need to make with federal law, but I don't think we actually do any federal law in here.
I think that there is a federal law that addresses a substance or materials that can encourage or lead to prurient behavior. And I know that Utah law also references that. However, I do not have that right in front of me. So I don't know if that's what was intended with what they mean by federal law as it relates to sensitive materials. So,
but we don't, and I'm just going to argue that we don't actually use that in our rulemaking here. So other than Utah law, that's where we're referencing.
I'm trying to see, as part of the Elementary Secondary Education Act, there are some things about school library programs in there, but that's more through literacy and standards of school library standards. Is that correct, Davina? It's not necessarily about federal law. Is that correct?
As far as what this was referencing yeah, I'm not sure where this came from originally. I know that in conversations out there, there's talk of the Miller test, the obscenity test, and prurient interest, and all of that, like the 3 prongs of the Miller test. That, but it's not actually federal law. It's yeah.
So I would just recommend we just have current Utah code or state law or whatever. And I would also add in here, just because of our guidance document, 53G4402, which is just about instruction materials. So at the end of that, that's it. 53G4402 and 53G5402 404. Those are those two pieces of code that talk about vetting instructional materials, that protective thing at the first of our guidance document. And then somewhere here, we need to reference the library platform. So I don't know if it's right after that or what, that we put something like shall provide an online platform for library materials consistent with 53G 4402. And then we don't have to put anything else in there. So I can read that again. Are you ready?
Yes.
Shall provide an online platform for library materials consistent with, is that how we say that? Or as described, however you want to say that, 53G 4402.
Is it platform or database?
It says platform in the
Oh.
law, but it probably is a database, but it says,
Yeah.
the law says platform.
Because it feels like it should be like, yeah.
I think the reason they use platform is because they want the forward-facing part of the database to be usable by the parents.
And they call it an online platform too.
They do.
Interesting.
I just want to make sure we've got the components of that in here. So, okay, that's all I had on that piece.
Okay, any other board members have additional thoughts or ideas that need to be considered or added?
The other one we need to do, because we designate what happens in an initial review and in a subjective materials review, but we just put into our thing, we just need to have something about designating whatever the language is, 3 or more members, including one parent, for the objective sensitive material review, and may include designees from the initial review. Just whatever our language was from the guidance document, because we articulate it in these other two provisions, but not that middle one. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I know, at least we're doing your high-tech skills here. So it's under, keep going down. It would be under the subjective or the objective materials review. Keep going down, right there, up. Yep, designate 3 or more. Yep, that section right there. And I put the thing in there so that we could reference it, so. Yep, perfect. And then I don't know if we need to state this. I feel like we do. But you guys can argue whether or not, like the end of this piece, it just says, sensitive materials removed from student access may not be sold or distributed to a minor. Just that simple. Which I know seems obvious, but, oh, we already have it there, okay. Oh, no, sorry, you pulled it over from the other document, that's why, okay.
Yeah, that does seem pretty obvious, but if we need to put it in there.
I think it would be worth repeating where it's in our guidance document.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Anything else? Board Member Reel, Board Member Green?
The other item is now we need to reference our guidance incorporated in the rule, how we do that with the others. And it would have a separate section, and you could actually do that after we're done. Do you know what I mean? If we just made the motion or amendment that you incorporate it by reference and put a section in here, if we just had something typed like that, so.
So does that change it from being guidance to being a requirement?
Well, we
makes
put it
so
in
that
as
it's not
resource.
guidance?
We put it in as a resource, just like we did with our reading rule last month. It's a resource for districts to use. And we just incorporate or talk about it being guidance document, just like we did with the reading materials checklist and the reading materials what is it? The two pieces we incorporated in there. They're resources for districts. I don't have the language in front of me,
Well,
but
how does that look? Superintendent may provide a guidance document for use by an LEA in developing an LEA's policy and accompanying procedures described in subsection 1.
that would be great. Now, my question is this, what is the difference between doing that and actually providing an incorporated document? Because all those others, we provide an incorporated document.
Makes the incorporated document be a rule in and of itself. It has the same force of law as a rule, where this is guidance.
Yeah, we want to make
So
sure we
just
don't do that.
So those others were guidance too. Or do we need to change those to guidance for districts or resources? Because they're not put in as, does that make sense?
I think one difference with like the counseling rules, for example, there was material in those incorporated documents that was not included in the rule. Whereas this guidance is kind of a summary of the rule and the law itself. And so I don't know that it necessarily needs to be, because there's no new information in the guidance document.
Okay. I just want to make sure if we're following that type of pattern that we're doing that with other things too then, because that's what we've been doing over the last several months, is incorporating documents in. But I see what you're saying, because it's not new information. It's more of a resource for the information that's available. Am I accurate? Am I articulating that accurately?
That's how I see it. I don't know if AG Buse has a different opinion, but that's how I see it.
Definitely see a distinction when you point it out like that.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure we're consistent though, because the document that we had last time was a resource. It wasn't a, right? I'm talking the reading rule. So I was trying to follow the same pattern that we used with that. In other words, it's not, you have to use this. It's a resource, but then when we incorporate it as a reference that way, incorporated into the rule, did it now become I have to use it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have that same question.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit confused on that.
Deputy Superintendent Norman, was that hand up or not?
It was up, but it's not answering that question. So I put it back down.
Okay, all right. Anyone want to answer that question or want to?
'Cause I want to make sure that we're clear that we could provide a guidance document, but it doesn't mean that it's in the same level as the rule, right?
I can say my understanding, and so hopefully by saying it out loud, then there's a clarification on it. If there's a guidance document that's not incorporated by rule, it has that flexibility, and so those are created. But when it is incorporated by rule, it has the effective rule, and so that's that. I think that would be a good clarification. If you're meaning it to have the same, like everything within it has to be done and followed, then it should be incorporated by rule. If it's more like the, let's say the AI framework, that is something that's more flexible and it's not incorporated by reference into anything, but it's something that the board will approve.
So
Okay, so
while I'm talking, we do have a board member that needs to leave by 12:50, which is in 3 minutes. And I, as a board or chair committee, you would be able to either finish this or ask for another special session or moving that forward. I just wanted to time wise, we have a committee member that needs to leave at 12:50.
So how close are we? Are we ready to vote on this?
I have just two more items and one of them is a clarification. We need to put in here final determination because we don't reference that anywhere. And so I'm on section 4.4. So 4.4 here on the determination where it says determination, it needs to say final determination there. Otherwise it's not clear. And then I have a question on, so if you go up to 1 of this section, in just a second when you're ready. No, back down, sorry. It's of section 4, 1 of section 4. This doesn't make sense. It says for challenges prior to July 1st, 2024, and the LEA shall report to the board a removal of the material based on the objective sensitive material final determination. We need to final in there, of which the LEA has sufficient information to support the LEA has sufficient information to support the determination of whether a removed material meets the threshold. The LEA does not do that. That doesn't make sense. We determine that, not the LEA. So something needs to change there.
Or does that just mean that they followed the process?
The LEAs who has the information of what the rationale was for their decision that they made in the past. The board
Right.
doesn't have the rationale of what the decision was in
But
the
that
past.
doesn't have anything to do with the threshold is what I'm saying. So maybe that we just need to change threshold to something else. The threshold is on our end, not theirs.
But wouldn't this be things prior to this new law? So it would be that the,
Of which the LA has sufficient information to support the final determination for purposes of,
Final determination as to whether it was objective.
yeah,
Sensitive
yeah, that's what it
material.
needs to be. The threshold is not even in there. That doesn't have anything to do with them. That's why I was like, I'm confused what we didn't quite get that worked out all the way, I guess.
Sorry, can someone repeat the change that needs to be made? I missed it.
Support the final determination of whether it meets the objective sensitive materials,
Yeah,
whether it is meets the,
criteria or something.
yeah, criteria is a good way to put it.
And then,
And then
Could
delete
we-
yeah,
the rest.
I'm wondering if we could change the word it of whether it, so that we know what we're speaking to. Is it the removal? Is it the material? Is it the?
Whether the material meets the objective sensitive material criteria.
yep.
Good.
That's
Whether
what I
the
had on my list.
previous,
I'm done.
whether the material previously removed. That's making it really wordy.
Yeah, that looks good.
Does clarify.
Okay. That's what I had on my list. So, and I guess if we miss something, we can make an amendment during the board meeting, but that's where I'm at.
Are we ready to move this forward to the board?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so.
All right, so would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we move draft 2 as amended. What's the title of it? Sensitive materials draft 2. Or sorry, I'd like to make a motion that we move R277628 sensitive materials draft 2 forward to the board for second and final reading. Did I get close on
As
that?
amended.
As
As
amended.
amended.
As amended. And if, I don't know if we need to do we do technical changes if there need to be on this? And any technical changes that need to be made?
Great, so we have a motion before us that we send R277628 sensitive materials draft 2 to the board for its final as amended to the board for their final approval with any technical changes that staff needs to take care of. Although, is there any further discussion?
No.
Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
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 I,
We had 4 responses and it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And I'm going to pass the leadership to Board Member Green to finish this up. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Appreciate-
Chair Booth. All right. Well, we do have one more agenda item that we
Can we
were
just
trying.
Make a
Oh, go ahead.
motion to just put it on our next standards and assessment meeting. Is that?
Yep, so we have that as our third item on our agenda, and we can make that motion to move that to our next board meeting.
Our standards and assessment meeting. So,
Okay.
okay,
All right.
Does that need to be voted on?
yes, probably.
yeah.
I think you might be muted, Board Member Green, if you're.
Wow, I must have muted myself. Yeah, so we have a motion to move our third agenda item for the Access Committee back to forward to our May Standards and Assessment meeting. Any other discussion to that?
The clarification is just on discussion around a possible student success, right? Because we had another motion that came out of committee that's not involving that. Am I right in
So,
saying that?
yeah, Vice Chair Earl, if we can have Elise, if you'll scroll, so we see motion member or that. So we took the notes, and if you'll scroll down just a little bit more, we took the notes of everything that was stated during the committee meeting, talking about, and then, for the future meeting, what it might look like, and whatnot. So all of that's within this motions document as just a preview of what was talked about last time. So I think the motion was, so we had the sunset date. But the second one was that you had a motion that the Standards and Assessment Committee work on a policy for a committee focused on student success opportunity and merit-based policies. So that would be the
That
motion.
would be the motion. Okay, I'll formally make that the item on our agenda that the Standards and Assessment Committee work on a policy for a committee focused on student success, opportunity, and merit-based policies be moved to our Standards and Assessment meeting in May.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, everybody vote.
Yes.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. All right. I think that looks good.
Okay.
I know it's not appropriate to clap in these meetings, but I just feel like there's got to be some sort of a virtual clapping, so I'm doing it on my own. There you go. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We
Thank you,
appreciate you so
everyone.
much.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
You do a formal motion to adjourn? Probably.
Okay, yeah. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone. You're miracle workers.
Member Green, can you stay on for just one more second?
Yes, I can.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Jerry and Alex, we are officially done with our meeting. If you'll stop streaming. And then I just have a question really quick for Member Green.